Welcome back for round two. Who is next on the list here? Public Works. Let's roll.
Good afternoon, Village President, council members. I'm Mark Janik. I'm your Director of Public Works. With me today, I've got the Assistant Director, Eric Jensen, who'll be doing some of the presentation as well. So I'm just going to go through the general fund right now, and then we'll go through refuse and fleet. Oops. What did I do now?
There you go.
No, I really don't know what happened. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not on here, but it is up there.
Okay.
So,
Would you like us to go forward?
right?
This guy? Okay. Okay, back to Public Works. Public Works is made up of 30 employees. Those employees, there's been a good amount of turnover in the last few years. The good news is that the employees are, there's high morale level. There's a lot of good skills there, and they're a young crowd of people, and they're very hard workers. Our basic functions are refuse, fleet, sewers, and streets, and then along with administration. So you see our guys out on the streets every day. Right now, you can see them doing a lot of leaf collection. There's refuse drivers every day, 7 days a week. On the weekends, they're collecting commercial. Roadway and right-of-way maintenance, snow removal, which took place earlier this week, just on the bridges. Operation and maintenance of the stormwater drainage systems, as well as sanitary sewer systems. Public facility maintenance, that's maintenance of the different buildings in town. And then the internal fleet services, which includes repairing the fire trucks and police vehicles. The org chart is not changed in terms of number of employees, and we're not asking for any new employees. But what has changed on the org chart is that this year, in 23, we've gotten four persons for each of our divisions. Those were existing employees that were promoted to those positions. It was part of the new union contract. So those names up there, they're new relative to the four persons. And that's otherwise it has not changed. 2023 accomplishments above and beyond our normal maintenance, which takes place every day relative to the right-of-ways, various pipe projects, stormwater and sanitary, and repairing roads and that sort of thing. We completed negotiations on a new union contract. Public Works did not have a union previous to this year. So that was I think that was at least a 2.5 year project. We replaced several vehicles, including leaf vacuum, refuse truck, and 2 other trucks. Well, we have new holiday lighting and janitorial contracts that we bid this year, and we have new companies doing that. We upgraded the security access system partially at the yards, Public Work yards, and here at Village Hall. And we also implemented a road striping and marking maintenance program, and we began a sign replacement program as well. In 2024, continued maintenance of the right-of-ways and streets, maintaining public facilities and landscaping, That will include further upgrading of the security system at the yards to complete that. That's going to include a new gate system. Village Hall elevator, that's been probably 40 years since the elevator was put in, so we need to modernize it. That's not going to change the cab itself, but the mechanics around the elevator itself. We're going to bid and manage HVAC replacement project at the yards. That's a 4-year project. You'll see it in the capital improvement costs. And then we're going to bid and then start a facility study for the various buildings that we own. And then finally, we're going to look into implementing a management system for service requests, Public Works. Our capital equipment replacement costs for 2024 is proposed to be approximately $776,000. That includes, as you can see here, a new dump truck. That's for the sewer division. Sidewalk plow machine. The yard security gate, which I mentioned previously. And HVAC roof units for the yards. That's the first year one of 4, $114,000. The elevator, we're expecting to cost somewhere around $175,000. And then the village facility study at $60,000. That's a 2-year study. We expect it to be maybe $120,000. We broke it into 2 years instead of 1 year. And here's the Public Works costs in general. You can see that our capital outlay is increased by a substantial amount. And then the total department, that's 17.6% increase, but that's, for the most part, that's capital costs that are driving that. We also have a facilities fund. These are projects that we complete around the various facilities in the village. This year, you might have seen the repair to the bell tower, which was just recently completed. We completed a new AV system here in Village Council Chambers, and then the security access system at Public Works and Village Hall. And for 2024, additional work at Village Hall, and then some work in the basement of Village Hall, both to the break room and then some repainting. Note that we're starting a facility study, so the facilities fund and the facilities that we'll be doing some repair on is going to go up most likely in the next few years once we do the facility study and find out what we need to further repair and replace. That cost is most likely going to go up. So I've got the assistant here to do the refuse and the fleet fund, but are there any questions for me relative to the general fund for Public Works?
Question. Since you have come from a different environment before Winnetka, how would you characterize, our position regard to capital and equipment and so on in Public Works from what you've seen in other villages? And
Well, I think, in my opinion, most of the, at least the vehicles that we have are in relatively good position, condition. Oh, you do have a lot of machines here. You do a lot of stuff that other municipalities I've been in don't do. For instance, leaf collection. That takes up a substantial number of vehicles and time. I do think, like for instance, this year we spent $265,000 in capital, which is very little from my point of view. We were talking previously about pushing things, from one year to the next because we're trying to keep the budget at a certain level. I think that you're going to see that at some point, and it's going to come very soon, like next year and the year after, that, for instance, we have maybe 39 vehicles, maybe 40 vehicles, and some of those vehicles, like the ones I'm proposing for 2024, maybe 17 years old, 13 years old, some are 20 years old. Now, some of them are on 10-year, theoretically 10-year replacement schedules, but we're keeping them for 15, 16, 17 years. You can push But as the fire chief mentioned, our costs for repair are going to go up. And just trying to get vehicles is very hard. Us ordering, mentioned the refuse truck. We were really lucky this year. Not only did we save money on our budgeted $400,000 purchase of a refuse truck, what we got this year. We would have had to, I would have come to you on like a 2-year request to get that truck normally, or a year and a half. So I do think that going forward, I mean, it's a big increase from year to year, for 2024, but easily next year, it could be the same amount or more.
So is this 5-year capital plan addressing these issues of the
It
obsolescence of these vehicles?
It addresses them, but then when the time comes for the budget, and then you don't, you're trying to save money and you don't want to increase the levy, then something has to go. This year, I cut out a bunch of capital project stuff, for next year. I cut out some trucks, some real expensive trucks, for a less expensive truck or vehicle.
Got it.
Now, is that the right thing to do? One thing we're going to do, we have these sidewalk machines, and we also use them for pushing of leaves. We're going to try to buy 2 vehicles for the one that we're proposing for 2024, just a different vehicle. Maybe we can use that instead to save money. But I do think that at some point we can't keep pushing stuff off. You're going to see it, and it's going to be expensive, and that's what's going to happen.
Right, and we don't have a separate fund for those vehicles, correct?
There isn't, no, it's all funded through our capital with net operating income. Yep.
Okay.
How often do opportunities come up to buy, like the refuse truck vehicle that came up that we bought that was out of cycle? How often do those kind of things come up? Is that a rare thing because people usually drive their trucks into the ground, or what?
No, as a matter of fact, this year we did also buy one of our trucks that we thought we were going to have to buy next year, but one became available. Now, it was a different color than green. We might have to paint it. It was white, but we took the opportunity to get that vehicle because we might have had to wait another year. There's no question that these auto manufacturers are having a problem, getting vehicles out. One reason because they're switching to EV on a lot of their other lines, so making trucks is not as important to them. So it does come up. On the refuse truck, we were just lucky because we started casting around, asking a bunch of people about refuse trucks, and somebody heard about it, and actually they contacted us and said, hey, we've got a truck, somebody backed out of their contract, do you want it? So we immediately said yes.
To Kirk's point that he made earlier today, I think we should be, especially with the delays in getting parts and things like that, I think we should be prioritizing anytime opportunities like that come up if they are a good value, and making sure that we can act quickly to do it. Because it sounds problematic to have such an old fleet, and if everything becomes aged at the same time and we'll find ourselves in the need of getting 3 big vehicles without being prepared for it, that would be more than a levy would.
Well, didn't we jump on 3 vehicles this year?
And these were all
Something that-
contract cancellations,
Funded
right?
or authorized?
We authorized, well, for John and for Brian, police vehicles,
Police vehicles,
Yeah,
that's
we
what it
put the
was.
order in this year. It shows up in next year's budget.
But we were able to benefit from somebody else canceling a contract,
That's
right?
correct, for the refuse
Right,
truck, that's
right.
correct.
So that doesn't,
That
does that
helps.
happen a lot? Or can we just put out a notice to the manufacturers or
It wasn't
the?
a manufacturer, actually, it was a dealer
Okay.
who gets the truck, it wasn't a manufacturer. I mean, it happens, but we can't depend on that.
For basic equipment, there's a possibility, but there's certain things that we specifically specify. That was a tongue one. Where we need the specs to reflect the needs for Winnetka. So that really falls more into Chief Ripka's realm, because how we design our fire trucks are maybe a little bit different than what you'd see in other places. We have tighter driveways and other turning concerns. John, is that fair? Yeah.
I mean, the spec on an engine is very specific to your community, how you design it, and then,
Okay.
you function with, who you have
But certainly, basic vehicles, basic trucks, there may be an opportunity.
Well, to that point, when you said that you swapped out for this year's budget some more expensive equipment for less, do you mean that you looked at a lower version of the equipment that
No.
we need? Just a one that by its very nature costs less?
Yes,
So like a car for a truck?
that's
Okay,
correct.
thanks.
I had one more question, and I don't know if it's here or if it's another part of the budget, about the solar panel installation. Is that in this budget?
Brian?
Oh, it's in
Brian will
Brian.
handle it.
Okay, even though it's at the yards?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Oh, one other quick question, maybe Rob, this is something you and I talked about, what's it called, the customer interface app? Is that like the app we had talked about that
Yes.
Northbrook uses or something like that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We had done some initial investigation of it, and due to the complexities of union negotiation and the actual app that we looked at, it just didn't quite work for us, but we're at a good point now to go look at it and start to automate. We do use a GIS app for refuse that will document misses and things like that, and that helps the efficiency of the collections quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
What is the result of the facility study? What do we get out of that, and how does that help us?
Well,
budgeting
what's
for the
going to
future?
tell us is the condition of our buildings, roofs, HVAC systems, whatever, windows, things like that. Electrical panels, elevator, possibly in whatever building it might be. Right now, we just don't have a good handle on the condition of our buildings.
So essentially, it's a capital needs assessment or a
Yes.
facilities, whatever, needs assessment. Just pounding, or the drum on the comments earlier about the equipment purchases and planning ahead. I think that's going to be a helpful thing for us to identify what those long-term capital, and I know that's why you're doing it, but just hearing over and over again these large outlays, cash outlays, whether it's equipment or facilities, it would be great for us to really see in a macro picture what
Right.
they are, so we can think ahead and, sort of level the playing field so we don't have these bumps in the road in future budget years.
Right.
And really be proactive. And again, this is me needing to learn on how we budget or save. But I would encourage us to think ahead and start, whatever the opportunities are, to start allocating funds for those expenses in the future, even though I know we're going to shoulder it in a current budget year for a future expense. But I think those would be the prudent things for us to do so we can be opportunistic when those opportunities come up.
Right, so that the results of this gets layered into the capital budget, right? So you have a master schedule for your facilities. I do think that we have made investments, but it hasn't necessarily been centralized enough to know where all the needs are. So for example, when I first got here, we were looking at renovating this building, right? And there was a new roof, new block tuck repair, new HVAC, sprinklers, all that. So this building was in pretty good shape. Lo and behold, we realized the elevator hadn't been touched in 40 years and it's not working anymore. So, and the police and fire buildings were renovated in the late 90s. So and you've seen roof and HVAC start to happen. So these are the signals to us that we need to get our arms around all of it so we have a better handle on how to fund it.
Okay, I'm going to ask the tough question then. Is part of does the property tax levy give us some space in the budget to start really working on some of those capital investments for longer term, or?
No,
It's more
essentially
operational?
Yeah, it's more operational. Primarily, as I was mentioning to Trustee Dearborn, you think of it as the uncontrolled operating expense of being pensions. That's essentially what it was trying to relieve the pressure on the general fund by funding that requirement.
So that if there is a fluctuation in building permits, so if all of a sudden market tanks, we don't get as many building permits, we have a guaranteed level of stable funding for operations?
That's part of it, yeah. Again, property tax levy is 50% of our general fund revenue. And what we want to be mindful of is that if that revenue line is flat, your expenses are going up, and that as you look at the net operating income that you saw in Tim's initial presentation, what you don't want to see is that net operating revenue just start to dwindle, then you can't fund any of your capital. We're trending okay. It's but it's time, it's our recommendation, it's time to think about that, so that we're positioning ourselves to be able to fund the known operational increases that we're going to have year over year, particularly pensions.
So even if we, like, maybe we can find the 500,050, right, to close the gap or do something less, it's not all or nothing, right? Maybe we could reduce the levy. Do you think then if by passing a levy, and I'm jumping to the end, I understand, but if we pass a levy now, that it reduces the chances of levies in the future years? And we can answer that. I guess that's
I
my
wanna think
question.
about
Like,
that, yeah.
we've gone for 9 years without a levy. At some point, are we going to be jeopardizing, is there a way to break it up?
Maybe
or-
another way of saying it is 3 or something less than 3 this year will alleviate a 6 to a 9% next year.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's a,
It's kind of like when we talked last Friday,
right.
and one of my, water heaters went out, and we had the opportunity to replace both of them
Right.
in 2019. But we didn't,
Right,
because we
right.
didn't need to.
Right.
Okay,
Right, so, yeah, you certainly don't want to have, you want to have manageable increases year over year as opposed to a big spike, not only you want to avoid big spikes in your expenditures and also big spikes in your revenue categories too, because that just rolls off to the resident. So how affordable is it year over year?
You,
okay.
you had talked about a CRM program that you're looking to put in. Is there somebody that's looking at this overall? Because when you start dealing with tech and CRM systems, they're not being done department by department, are they?
No, we'd want to have one platform
That's-
to work on
okay.
across all departments.
what I just wanted-
So
okay.
think about it this way, it may be centralized in Public Works, maybe, but if we get a phone call in the manager's office for a service request, our staff would have access to that platform, you'd be able to send it in, and then it's worked off a central system.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
don't get transferred to Public Works and then get into a voicemail.
Right. You'd just be able to put the request in, and
I just want to make it, there's central oversight. That's
It'd
great.
have to be.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, Assistant Director Jensen will go over refuse and fleet.
thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Director Janik. Good afternoon, Village Council, President Rentz, Manager Behan. I'm Eric Jensen. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Works, and I will cover. Seem a little too tall for this. I always have to adjust it a few times. I'll be covering the Refuse Fund, which is the Utility Fund, and the Internal Service Fund, which is the Fleet Fund. Starting with the Refuse Fund, this is a utility fund entirely funded by the user fees for refuse service, and it covers all residential services, including traditional backdoor and curbside recycling collection and yard waste collection, commercial services, including refuse and recycling, our special collection services, and the annual spring cleanup. Looking back over the last year, a number of things were continuations of the existing services, but 2 things I'd point out in particular. Number 1 was the transition to the 5-day refuse from a 4-day refuse system. That allowed us to transition the refuse collectors from 10-hour days to 8-hour days, and also standardize their hours with maintenance workers so we can cross-train and build some operational efficiencies and synergy there. The other thing I would point out, as we talked a little bit before in the last presentation, was the purchase of the refuse truck. Having that additional truck right now and holding on to the old truck has given us a lot of extra operational flexibility. So if we lose a truck or something goes down, we now have that built-in assistance to be able to cover it. Looking forward to next year, we're going to continue to analyze the possible transition to a commercial scavenger program. This would be where the village would no longer provide the commercial service, and it would be up to each customer to seek out a private hauler. We're also going to continue education of residents on refuse and recycling through our partnership with the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County. And with them, we can do things like the annual pumpkin collection, which occurred this week, the annual document destruction, electronics and styrofoam. And last but not least, we'll be purchasing 1 additional scooter. Well, it's a tractor, affectionately called a scooter. But those are used traditionally for backdoor service. Looking at the financial overview, you can see things are relatively the same. We are seeing a little bit of an increase, primarily due to recycling costs going up. That's a built-in cost adjustment in the contract itself. This also includes a one-time capital contribution to the Solid Waste Agency for a roof project they're doing this year. So as part of the budget, we're proposing a 2.5% adjustment to residential refuse fees, and here you can see the full chart. Council approved last year a number of different service options that allow customers to right-size. So for example, now, there used to be simply just once a week backdoor and twice a week backdoor, but now there's also once a week backdoor with 4 containers, which is the same volume per week, but it's one time instead of 2, and that gives us more operational flexibility. And you can see on the right-hand side there, those are the current counts of accounts. Those change weekly. In fact, I did 2 today. So people are allowed to switch at their option. And while it's not on this particular slide, there are some very minor adjustments to the special collection fees, including a $5 increase for the base fee for special collections and a $2 per yard increase in the charge for additional yardage. And then finally here, we have the commercial refuse fees. This is a 7.5% proposed increase, again, primarily driven by the increase in recycling rates we forecast for next year. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on the refuse fund or refuse in general.
Eric, what year, and Rob, you may have this, or Tim, what year was it that the fund became self-sustaining where we weren't funding it from the general fund?
3 years ago?
Was it 3?
fiscal 20? Yeah.
Okay, so
I remember rolling out new containers during the pandemic and when everybody was locked down.
And
Yeah.
we're now basically break even on this.
Correct.
I mean, it's now fully sustainable. We just adjust rates as expenses change.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
All right. No additional questions. I'll move on to the internal service fund or the fleet services fund. This fund is entirely funded through interfund transfers from other departments. So essentially what happens is the departments pay for the services that are provided by the fleet services area. Looking back over this last year, we completed just under 2,100 in-house tickets by ourselves. That is solely work that's done in-house. That's nothing that got shipped out. In fact, this morning I pulled the tickets for the numbers that have been shipped out. It's only 65 tickets. So we provide almost all services within house. And even those tickets that go out, it's extremely specialized work that has to be done by someone with a higher level of certification. We also purchased 1 leaf truck, 2 dump trucks, and again, we purchased 1 scooter, affectionately called a scooter. Looking forward to next year, we'll continue that base level of service to provide to all the departments. We're also looking to replace 1 dump truck for the sewer division, a sidewalk machine, which Director Janik alluded to before, and an additional scooter. We're going to continue investing into our existing staff to get them up to speed with ASE certifications. That's a standard in the fleet services field, as well as the emergency vehicle technician certification. And then we're going to consider the transition to a new fleet management software. We do have an asset management software for fleet in-house right now. We've had it for a number of years, and it works. The problem is, though, it has no interconnection with any other system. So there's no financial interconnect. We have to pull that all out manually. There's no interconnection with our automatic vehicle location or tracking system. So we want to upgrade to a new system that can handle all of that and increase some efficiencies there. And this is just the financial overview of the fund. Again, essentially about the same. And with that, are there any questions about the internal service fund?
I guess the snow melter's going to have to wait. Like that thing.
All right, and with that, I will turn it back over to Director Janik. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, so Public Works through the sewer division, there's 2 other funds. One's for sanitary sewer and one's for stormwater. In general, in terms of sanitary sewer, we have about 250,000 lineal feet of sanitary sewer in the village, about 1,100 manholes, and 1 sanitary lift station that's at the bottom of the ravines, the hill down there. For 2023, annually, we do video and cleaning maintenance programs on the sanitary sewer. We try to find and eliminate any sort of cross connections, that is water that might be infiltrating into the sanitary sewer, and then provide assistance and guidance to property owners. We get calls numerous times by property owners who think that maybe they're backing up because of our sanitary sewer system. we will go to their house and try to help them diagnose what's going on. Sometimes, for 99% of the time, it's not us, it's not our sanitary sewer, but we do go out, check our sewers, make sure we're not, backing up anybody. A lot of times, most of the time, it's their own sanitary system. They have some kind of blockage, roots, that sort of thing. For 2024, relative to sanitary sewer, we reline our sanitary sewers every year. $600,000 worth is being proposed for 2024. We did $600,000 worth this year. We need to award 2 contracts, one for I&I, infiltration and inflow, relative to the sanitary sewer, and then investigation for the sanitary sewer force main that goes from the sanitary sewer lift station at the ravines, goes up the hill, and then deposits into one of our other sanitary sewers. The pipe is relatively old. We're not sure if we need to replace part of it or just line it if it's in condition to line. So that's relative to a capital cost in sanitary sewer fund. That's another $300,000 approximately for both those contracts. Other than that, our annual cleaning and video inspection, our root intrusion foaming program, which is killing roots that would otherwise block the sanitary sewer, locate and eliminate cross connections, and provide assistance and guidance to property owners. And this is the fund expenditures and revenues for the year. As you can see, the capital outlay is up by 50%, and that's for the 2 studies, the I&I and for the force main.
And this I&I study is for an area of the village that has not been studied yet.
What area is
I
that?
believe it's north. Is that correct, Jim? Yeah. And Mark, I mean,
Yeah.
why don't you come up?
I'll have to lower it from Eric's elevation to smaller people. As Mark had indicated here, that I&I that we had done, or the relining we had did, that completed the RJN study. You may recall a few years back, that was the last I&I study, I&I inflow and infiltration, that we did previously for a separate section of the village. So the village's commitment to the $600,000 completed all those high and medium priority repairs. So that's what was completed this year. The new study will complete the rest of the system that we haven't done. So there's been 2 previous I&I studies. This will complete the last. This will be the 3rd of the system. And from there, we'll kind of start back over again. We'll find out where our high and medium priority locations are at. And then we'll come back with recommendations on a relining program or structures and things like that.
Primarily the northeast section of town.
That is, I believe it's the northwest section of
Northwest,
town.
and it kind of moved over towards Green Bay.
Correct, and then down, correct.
Right. So that's an area that needs attention,
Right.
probably.
Have we rooted out most of this cross-connection mess that was being,
Yeah, that's
Purposefully
what
or-
Jim and Mark were referring to.
Yeah,
So the I&I studies will determine where there is illegal cross connections, and then
you only did one, so you just figured out the one section, which is the worst, I think.
Yeah, so we tried to do that by a data-driven approach. So
Right.
when we had flooding incidents in town, we would do surveys and we'd find out what caused it. And not everybody floods for the same reason. Some
Right.
are sanitary. So we really tried to figure out where were the clusters of sanitary backups occurring. And then we mirrored that with our own kind of initial testing. We said, yeah, these are the areas we need to prioritize because they're the worst ones.
And they're also, these are all illegal.
The ones, yeah, I mean, that's generally,
What's
yeah, somebody,
happening.
yeah, or there's a failure, and it's actually leaking into something it shouldn't.
Right.
So illegal cross connections or failure of the structures.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the time it's not illegal. Most of the time it's just crack pipes.
Okay.
And water gets into them. And so when they do smoke testing, as you've probably seen before, it shows where there might be some opening or where water might be getting into.
So when the smoke comes
sanitary
up
or storm.
and you have a heavy rain, that rain is getting into your sanitary system that doesn't have the capacity to handle it.
I had one quick question about the relining program, because it made me think about the 100-year replacement of the water main. Is the relining, and I can't remember, is it also structural as well as a sealant? So is it
Yes.
expected, like if we, and what is the life? I mean, should we be planning for some capital improvement for the sewer system in 50 years? Like, what is the time frame on the relining?
If you, doing the lining should last 30 years. And it is structural. I mean, it's not going to be completely, obviously not as strong as the new ductile pipe or plastic pipe you might be putting in, but it certainly is a lot less expensive than digging a pipe or replacing a pipe. So, but it does last. Oh, Jim.
I was going to say, yeah, it's actually the structural lining that we put in, it says a 50-year life. It's a structural liner, and we have invested, that's with the village investing on it, we've hit those two critical areas. So the reliability in the sealing to reduce the I&I has been dramatic. We're probably leading the way in most of the northeastern Illinois communities with our commitment for it.
Okay, because I think of it almost like an aneurysm, right? Like, all of a sudden, you spring a leak, right? But if you can put in your little mesh thing in there in your artery, it's going to stay there? Is that like?
That's how it works.
So trustee
Right.
Abbott,
I'm the perfect example of that.
I've got
yes.
two.
Well, my brother's a vascular surgeon, so that's why I think.
I got one other,
this whole process tries to identify all the problems that you have with your sanitary system.
Yeah.
Your illegal connections, are there failing
Right.
connections? Where are the points of intrusion or inflow
Are
from
we-
rain, all those things.
I think it's great. Are we doing this testing on the private roads as well?
Got your answer, sir.
They have to pay for it themselves.
So it's our system, I
It's
believe.
private.
The high tax paying streets, yes.
If it's our system, yeah.
I am.
So here's the,
Well, I mean,
here's
as a-
the
as a-
corporate answer.
as a
If it's our
service,
system,
no,
we'll
'cause it-
take care of it.
No, I'm actually kind of serious.
No, I know. If it's our system, we'll take care of it.
So what if it's not yours? I mean, I guess my point is, it's still going to affect
Yeah.
the community.
Correct. Yeah,
So we should,
Sewers aren't private.
no, they shouldn't be.
I don't know. I have to find out. I don't,
They should not
I
be.
thought they were public, but I
They should
assume
be
they're ours.
public. So again, I guess if,
Bob
that's
is
why
finding
I
a
do want,
budget
in all-
gap.
Let's have it
all
offline.
seriousness, I do want to know because they affect the rest of the village storms, they all
Yeah,
feed in there.
It's all going to
so-
be tied in, and all of it's tied into MWRD as well, the
Right.
interceptors that go down Sheridan. and
So we
across
should
Diamond.
probably make sure they're tested
So,
correctly.
Put in the sidewalks, we'll take care of your sanitation. Until then, you just.
Flush gently.
Exactly. I'm ready.
On the sanitary, this is the one, looking at the fund balance, and I don't know where Jim is, but. Looking at the fund balance, this is the one fund balance that's always sort of, I've never been able to figure out, I guess, the excess.
we've got to have one to,
What's that?
we always have to have one that kind of gives you some trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a fund minimum.
Correct.
$350,000. And we have a fund balance of $2.5 million. Now, some of the funds with excess, like stormwater, we know where that's going, you know, sort of where. This one, this particular operation seems to essentially either make a little money each year or break even, you know, so this fund balance is, you know, unless our minimum is off, and so it gets to the, kind of gets me thinking, why don't we rethink this? I mean, if other parts of the village have capital, i.e. what we're gonna hear in an hour or so, have big capital needs. why
So
don't we-
we're accumulating some funds for not only the next part of the village that we haven't invested in. So this is a utility fund that is based on cost of service as well. Right?
So
So
are you saying that you see a path where this excess fund balance starts to dissipate?
yes,
And what, is that a 10-year path, or is it what?
let us follow up. Tim, do you have anything in your
so,
notes?
We've seen that, and that's when we were building the budget for this year, that's why we pulled some of those AMI expenses into the sanitary sewer fund, because the billing process for billing, your utility bills utilizes the water meter to get a unit that also gets billed for both the water and the sanitary. So it made sense to put that charge. And over, if you look at the 1 year, you're right, but at the end of the 5 year, if you work that 5-year plan, it goes from a cash balance from 2.8 million down to 1.2 million over the next 5 years. The sanitary sewer fund.
The sanitary sewer fund, correct.
And the minimum is 4 months of,
4 months of operating expenses. So in how we've done it, we did this I&I study, I think we did the first one in 2017, spike in capital projects. We did another one, spike in capital projects. We've gotten to the tail end of this last one. We're going to do another one. There's going to be, once we get the data from that study, we'll see what capital is recommended, and then we'll build it in.
I guess it seems to me, getting back to some of the good points that were made across the table here about being flexible on capital. We have certain fund balances where they're a little tighter, and that we may not feel like we have the flexibility to buy a $300,000 refuse truck or whatever it might be. But then we have this other fund sitting here for the next several years with $2 million of excess balance. I mean, is there merit in thinking a little flexible on some of these fund balances?
Yeah, so I know it may seem high in relation to the minimum, but knowing that the age of our sanitary system it's old, right? And there's things we don't know about it, and we're going to have to be perpetually maintaining it. I wouldn't recommend that this fund balance is healthy enough to transfer it somewhere else. I believe we're not recommending an increase in the sanitary rate this year because we leveled. But I do expect the capital expenses to grow.
This gets back, I think, Tina, to you when you said you thought we should have a 10-year capital plan. We would see that.
And staff is working, we have these working documents that are beyond 5 years. So we do know that the sanitary fund is going to require more capital investment. Given its age and what we've experienced in the first rounds of rehabilitation, it's going to need it. Yeah, it's going to need it.
Well, why wouldn't we spend down some of this capital outlay? I mean, I know we are going down 200,000 this year, so we are spending down some of that balance. Right.
And I think that's exactly what we've done, is be flexible. The AMI was not budgeted in this fund last year. It's pulled into this fund this year. That's $900,000 that's in this fund that was not in this fund last year. So we do that. We've done that in the stormwater fund, where we've identified that there's some buildup in the motor fuel tax fund. We're transferring some of that over to the stormwater as well. So we do that on a 5-year basis as we go, but we don't, in 1 year, there's fund balance, let's buy, 4 trucks so that we can knock it down. So, we try and take a longer term approach. It might take a couple years to smooth it out, that sort of thing.
Well, and I know that you three disagree with me on this, but it seems to me, and I've mentioned it, that this advanced metering.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. That the advanced metering project, which is great, maybe should be 3 years, is an infrastructure item. And that I think perhaps that the allocation to the finance department could be reallocated to some of these other funds, and then it wouldn't go through the general fund, that particular item. And I think you were kind of going here, Chris, we've got this capital here. Why don't I'd rather use some of the capital, if it's excess for the time being, than have our residents pay a higher tax rate when we don't need. If we have the capital, we don't need it.
So we place looking at the AMI allocation as a follow-up, as we discussed. So we'll look at that. I wouldn't rob Peter to pay Paul to take money out of the sanitary fund to go to some other fund, because we know the expenses are going to be there. Okay. I just don't.
And by the
it's
way,
an old
Bob,
system.
I'm a slow study, because I didn't put together what you were talking about, we were talking about out in the hallway. Now I get it. And I concur. So I understood why they put it where they put it, but I didn't understand the impact on the general fund. And now I see why you were going there. So, and that makes perfect sense to me, too.
We'll see what comes back.
So it's only 2, not 3.
Okay, correct. There are definitely 2 against it.
Okay. Continue with stormwater?
Yes.
Okay, so the stormwater fund, I believe it was instituted about 10 years ago. Fee on property relative to impervious surface. The stormwater system in the village includes about 350,000 linear feet of pipe, approximately 1,800 catch basins and inlets, 33 outfalls, and 8 storm sewer pump stations. In 2023, similar to sanitary sewer, we do annual cleanings and video inspections of the pipes. We completed over 27 individual storm sewer repairs. That would be digging up pipe and replacing sections of pipe that had failed. And then deployment of auxiliary equipment to increase stormwater flow. That would be the use of our combo jetting vac machines to clean the system and make sure that the water flows correctly. And in 2024, continued repair of the system whenever it occurs. Oftentimes, we see a sinkhole develop somewhere, and that's oftentimes a collapse of the storm sewer pipes. Cleaning and maintenance, critical maintenance of ditches that we have in town, open ditches that we clean, get rid of vegetation, and then support the engineering department with the stormwater master plan. We work with engineering if they're doing some work, for instance, at the outflow at the creek over on Winnetka Avenue. We help them with the pump system over there if necessary, or anything else that they might need. Our maintenance guys are very creative, and so we help them with the system. And if there are no questions on this, I'm going to hand this over to the village engineer, Jim Bernal, to continue with stormwater. Any questions?
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay. I'll put on my cheaters as well as the stents and glasses, they all go together. So thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. I'll be providing you a brief overview of the proposed stormwater capital for fiscal year 2024, as well as the 5-year funding for the stormwater projects. So before we begin with our goals for next year, I'm going to recap some of the larger accomplishments here for the stormwater fund in 2023. Most of this you have seen, so I'll go through these relatively quick. But we completed the North of Willow project in coordination with New Trier High School in the Winnetka Park District. We've substantially completed the wetland earth excavation activities at the Hibbard Preserve. We're now working on the crossing of Hibbard Road and Willow Road. That's going to be coming up here. And then we'll have final restoration in the spring. We've successfully applied for and received grant funding for that property at 1205. This allowed us to modify our design slightly for the conveyance, saving the village lots of money. We'll be demoing that home here later at the end of the month of November. We also completed the design of the contract for the Crow Island Stormwater Storage Project, which is the next underground storage project. We'll be going out to bid soon for that. And of course, we're continuing to advance the designs for the conveyance projects. This design is what allows us to pursue those heavy funded grants. So this is critical that we have this so we can demonstrate that we're ready to go. So in looking at our goals for next year, we'll be looking to complete the Hibbard Preserve Stormwater Project substantially. This includes the final wetland restoration, award the contract for the Crow Island project, and then complete that project in coordination with District 36's plans and the Winnetka Park District. Our goal is to complete the underground storage by the beginning of June of next year and continue to move west towards Hibbard Road. We'll also be looking to advance the design for the west and southwest Winnetka stormwater conveyance projects. That's the rest of the projects on the west side conveyance. So we're looking to finalize those designs. As we do that, we'll start to get a better, clear understanding of what the actual costs will be. We'll be looking at the conflicts and start developing that. So next year when we come to you, we'll have more refined numbers. We'll be looking to award an engineering contract to start looking at the east side. So not only are we continuing the work on the west side, but we're starting to take a look forward and starting to evaluate the east side now on future improvements like we've done before. We'll continue to implement the landfill configuration. This is as we start to continue to accept soil from the various job sites, conveyance and storage will continue to grow on the landfill area. And then, of course, we want to advance the Willow Road reconstruction project. As you may recall, this was a grant that we received through the Council of Mayors, a little over $2.5 million towards construction, and a little over $900,000 for the design. So we're continuing to advance those and then working forward with the rest of the project. So the next slide is an exhibit showing the current stormwater vision. I wanted to start with the overview exhibit first, just as a reminder of the various elements and future phases of the projects that I'll be discussing next. And if necessary, I'm happy to refer back to this if anybody has any questions about where the projects are at. So the next 3 slides, this will present the current 5-year stormwater program. There's a lot of detail here, and I think most of us have seen this in the past, so I'm going to focus really on the projects in 2024. Again, by the summer of 2024, we'll be substantially completed with the construction on the Hibberd Preserve Wetland Project. That's shown here as the Cook County Forest Preserve Stormwater Wetland Project. Again, the landfill configuration. We have dollars allocated for the Crow Island storage. That's the underground vault system that we'll be installing at Crow Island School and a part of the Crow Island Park. We carried a little bit of funds over for the 18-hole golf course just in case we carry any final payments that should be completed this year, but we have some funding just in case. And then we have the Hibberd Road Conveyance Project. Again, this is the completion of the Hibberd Road project there. We've got the Willow Road East Conveyance. This is a portion of the Hibberd Preserve. There's part of the box culvert that's at the southwest corner of Hibberd Road and Willow. We've got the Crow Island Outlet Project. That's the box culvert work that comes out of the underground vault system and heads west. There's the Mount Pleasant Street Project. Again, this is also a portion of the box culvert that goes to the east towards Glendale. We're stopping just a little bit past Glendale and getting ready for future work. And then we have the Sunset Road West project. That is when the box culvert comes out and hits Sunset Road. This is to complete that project on that portion over there. And then we have mitigation fees. As some of you may recall, we had entered into a contract with the company, which we preferably call as the RES project. This is the underground wetland mitigation project that was required as part of meeting our requirements for the U.S. Army Corps. This project is being built at the Paul Douglas Preserve. If anybody is interested, this is located near the northeast corner of Central Road and Freeman Road in Hoffman Estates. And then finally, we've got some costs here for the construction management of the conveyance. That's for services as we work on the Crow Island underground storage component. And then again, the east side modeling, and then we carry forward our contingency for those unknown components. So with that, I'm just going to stop for a second, and Tim's going to come up and talk a little bit here about some of the funding source for stormwater.
Hi. So we have, this is a summary of the 3-page spreadsheet that I just handed out. And also what I handed out was the stormwater tracking sheet that we provided every time we've come together to approve a major project or a major component of the stormwater project. So you should be very familiar with that spreadsheet. But just overall, in summary, we have a financial plan for the next 5 years for the stormwater project. It relies on, we have our beginning cash balances, then operating revenues of about a little over $2 million, additional grants in 24 and 25. Most of that is the $12 million grant from the DCO that will start receiving $7 million next year, and then 25, the additional $5 million. Some fund balance transfers from the general fund and the motor fuel tax fund. Relies on some debt service in 2026. This was due to the debt service that was freed up for the bond refunding in 2020. And then we have the future funding. That's the $8,775,000 that has an asterisk. So the future funding is the funding that we haven't secured a hard source of funding for. So there are some opportunities out there, as we mentioned earlier, that we're looking into the FEMA BRIC HMA grant, and we have an application out for that for $24.1 million. So then that's your beginning cash, all your revenue sources, and then operating expenses. And then we have a summary of the different broad categories, so minus the storage projects. And you can see by the time we get to the end of 2025, we're out of the storage component of the project and we move mostly into the conveyance. And then also by the end of 2024, most of our soft costs have been spent at that point, the engineering, et cetera. And then we're still carrying a significant contingency for the remainder of the project. And then finally, we get to the ending bottom line cash, and, we have full, positive cash balances throughout, with, again, the big kind of bogey being that 2027 future, identifying a secure future funding source for that last couple of years of the project. So just some notes on the cash flow. So the total stormwater project is $81.9 million. That's on the stormwater tracking sheet. So that's consistent with where we started, including the annual inflation component. We came back and we determined that the CPI was the useful inflation component. And each year, when we get the December inflation of the previous year, we look at the unspent portion of the project and apply that inflation component and then build in another column. And we keep tracking every single contract that we bring forth that is applied against this, we update this tracking sheet. In total, we have identified $35.1 million in grant funding towards this project. That's not including the application out. That's what we've been awarded and can, very reasonably expect to receive. So that would be 42.94% of the project. We've committed, that means we've signed contracts for projects totaling $41 million so far. Of those 41, we actually anticipate cash out the door of $32.5 million, and then in the remaining spending, additional cash out the door for 2024 to 2028 of $49 million. So if you have any questions on the financial aspects of the plan.
I guess I go back to, I think this is really good to see these numbers this way. As I look at the strategy, the East Coast, the east side will be less of a engineering or a project as the west has been. It should be not as difficult, are we thinking?
Is that a question?
It is a question.
Okay. The scale will be less.
Yeah, clearly.
Okay. We do anticipate that in order to achieve water quality goals, we're going to have to find appropriate locations for underground storage further upstream because of the outlets to the lake. So that's what I can tell you. So it's not going to be the scale that you had on the west side, but in terms of estimating what it's really going to be, we got to do the work yet.
And as we look at what is our end goal? I mean, we're not going to solve every single problem. Are we looking for 80%? I mean, because the last 10% can bankrupt you.
So our goal, our design standard has been 100-year level protection.
Yeah.
Right, and that would be our goal for the east side, because you want to have equity across the village. But we're not controlling for private property topography changes.
Right.
That's not part of our system.
Great.
Right. But we want to make sure that the water doesn't go in the basements or the garages and keep it off the property. That's the goal.
And I think that's great. And I think it's got to be a mix of private, public, where the homeowners has to, reasonably try and protect themselves versus just.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we even help them figure out how to do it, but they got to do it.
Yeah, we do. There's a lot of that work that.
Okay.
I have a couple quick questions. The first is the east side modeling. We're showing we're going to do that in 2024, so that's part of our budget, right? We're going to start to look at the east side.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing through to 2028.
Don't have the data yet.
But we think, though, do we think it's reasonably going to be a 5-year or 4-year program after that? I mean, I know we don't know what we don't know. I mean, it seems like to sum it up, it seems like the western side of the village project, which we're currently in, has been very focused on detention and, getting enough detention so it doesn't back up into people's backyard, the streets as well, the streets we want it to back into, but,
Structures.
not,
Yeah,
structures.
yeah.
I continue to hear from people on the east side that this is an inequitable project because nobody floods on the east side, which I think is a falsehood, because I think the data that we've collected shows that there are plenty of basements on the east side that flood. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
not all for the same reasons.
No.
So one response to that is one of our targeted investment areas to prevent sanitary backups, which we put into the flooding category,
Right.
has been on the east side.
Right. So we've probably spent more on the I&I studies on the east side, right? But I just want to make it clear on the public record that, because you guys see the data of all the homes, there are plenty of east side homes that have wet basements,
Yeah,
right?
going back to the 2011 Burke study, it modeled where the problems were, and when we did the surveys, the flooding surveys, that tied to the modeling. Now, the modeling needs to be updated. Bulletins have changed in terms of what is a 100-year storm now. But in terms of the west side, yes, it's heavy on detention because of our restrictions to being able to send water to the river.
Right.
We can't flood downstream. With, 6 outlets to Lake Michigan, there's less restriction, but you still have more regulatory oversight.
Because right now, our water,
Working with addressing water quality issues, velocity rates, things like that.
because right now that stormwater, because it's an existing system, it goes unfiltered into Lake Michigan, right? Or
But
there's some,
To meet our NPDES permit, we undertake cleaning and certain things each year to get our IEPA permit. But in terms of water treatment, like you're seeing over and underground, we don't have that yet.
so that'll be
There's
the
no
focus
mandate.
on
There's no
that
mandate
eastern.
From the IPA for that.
Yeah, so when we look at the modeling for the east, it'll be less heavy on detention. I mean, there may be some detention
Going to need some, yeah.
to filter, right? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, but to try to layer in capital investment, we just don't have the data yet.
Question on and thank you for this analysis. So just to understand, so when we started this back a few years ago, we thought 76 million, inflation, now we're 81. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when it was first approved, there was the yellow unfunded source at the time, and it was about $8 or $9 million, as I recall. And so we've had inflation. I think it's actually budgeted been remarkably close to the original. But so right now, if I'm looking at this, we plan on, I'm just thinking about the village in context of maybe the east side, what that's going to entail. So we're looking at borrowing, if we don't get the grants, hopefully we'll get the grants, but we're looking at borrowing $7 or $8 million in 2026.
Which was part of the plan of when we refunded.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
But part of the original plan was that we would have a shortfall of $9 million. And now
Pretty close to the same.
now we have a shortfall of $16 million. We have the $8 million at the end, plus the borrowing of the $7 million.
So.
No, it was roughly the same. The
It's
7
roughly the
million
same.
it's been
So the
consistent.
7 million was always contemplated?
Yes.
Yeah,
That was, okay.
might have been 7.5 at one point, but we tweaked the number a little bit, but yes. it's-
Okay, so when do let's talk about that $8 million then. Again, we're not that far away, I mean, we're only a few years away from having to think about that. We might have to borrow it if we don't get the grant. How else would we address this, and would we embark on an east side stormwater plan before we had this sort of covered?
Yes,
We would,
of course. There's a commitment to the community to embark on it,
but
of
we have to
course.
be able to afford it.
Well, but again, until you get into these projects, as we saw with this one, Bob, that you need to have a plan and you need to be somewhat shovel-ready in order to go out and seek the funds to execute. So yes, we would embark on it. It's not to say that we would go whole hog into construction, just like when we started with this one. Certainly the funding we obtained from Robin Gable was significant and helped quite a bit. But we started the project without knowledge of that funding. That came in after the fact, and we were using a combination, at that point, our projections were a combination of the borrowed funds that were refinanced, the original bond issues, right? And general fund transfers. And the rest of it, at that point in time, and I feel like a broken record, but I keep repeating it to different people, is that the commitment to the community back in 2016, 2017, was to move the project forward and to bring it in for the original dollars, which were 75 million. This is 2020, but I think that commitment was prior to that, it was like 2017. Or it might have been 72 million originally. And
That's right.
But the commitment was to move the project forward, and if you remember the 100 people raising their hand in this room, if we could stay at that level, they were fully supportive of whatever it took, including potential increases in the stormwater utility funding. The objective always, and this is going back to 2011, was to try to bring this thing through, and this was my voice at the table. I asked the question at that point in time over at the community house, how many people would pay $35 a month to end the flooding? And the entire room stood up at that time and supported that particular thing. Our ERU is it 20?
22, $23.
22 or 23. So we've never even sniffed at the original $35 commitment in 2011. So yes, I mean, if there were a shortfall and all of a sudden we were pariahs in the state of Illinois and couldn't find any money anywhere, we'd have to go back and adjust our stormwater utility rates to cover that $8 million or whatever it happens to be. The reality, I think, the reality is that there are funding sources out there. We've got on the radar screen to a great extent in the stormwater community as somebody who is not only doing something, but is somebody who is doing the right thing for all the right reasons. And, you know, even though it's painful to me to think that we sent, how much was it, Tim, Jim, out to Hoffman Estates? Where is he? So.
I want $2 million, a little over $2 million.
It broke my heart that we had to send, and I fought tooth and nail to keep that money here, but sometimes you got to look at the writing on the wall and realize you're not going to be able to capture it all. We didn't have anywhere to spend $2 million that would work, so we had to send it to Hoffman Estates. But what that garnered us in attention and as stewards of the environment and a community that was doing the right thing was really significant, and it's been one of those actions that's opened the door to other funding sources. So I wouldn't lose sleep over the $8 million in 4 years. Look at what we've done in the last 2 or 3 in accumulating funds.
Okay, so the goal, the hope, obviously, would be grant funding that's warranted. I mean, that's the hope. If it were not to come through, we could start raising the stormwater fee. You don't want to start raising that in 2027.
No, God, no.
So that's what I'm saying, is when would we start to address the yellow $9 million? When would we just wait for this year and see about the grant funding?
I think we have another year, to be honest with you, because, Tim, what's this, remind me of the schedule for the $24 million grant notification?
We will hear by August of next year.
Yeah. So that would start to tie into our budgeting process. And, but we're still going to keep an eye out for other funding opportunities. Jim has done a really good job of working with the North Shore Council of Mayors in identifying what's called STP funds. These are surface transportation funds that you can allocate towards arterials like Willow Road funding. That's one of the reasons is that number came down a little bit, and we think there's a little bit more money to get. So we're going to chase what we can. But I think we need another year, and then we can start to model, do some financial scenarios to say, okay, do we need to start adjusting the fee?
Okay. And I think if we market the east side and I don't mean to market in a negative sense, but the fact is that a big portion of the east side project will be collecting and storing as well and cleaning water before it gets deposited into Lake Michigan. And I think that's something that's going to gain a lot of traction and is going to gain a lot of attention. I've talked to a lot of people who are involved in this. Matter of fact, we talked to Dick Durbin about it, and he was really interested in finding out what our program would be for our discharges into Lake Michigan.
Good.
And wants to be there to support us when the time comes. So, you know, you plant these seeds now, and then they come, you know, they start to grow years in the future. And thank goodness we have people on staff that keep knocking on those doors and reminding them that we had these conversations, so we stay fresh in everybody's minds. I mean, I think what we've learned is you don't get it if you don't ask.
Well, it's a project that deserves it. I mean, we've, done pretty darn well in terms of securing funding. But this is a fair piece of change looming out there that we're going to have to look at some point. Hopefully it'll be taken care of next year.
And not to steal Jim's thunder, I am proud of the village's efforts on this front. We established a budget and I believe it was 2017 when the original 71 or 72 came through, and we have not budged off that budget in almost 9 years now. Jim has produced a project of $41 million without one change order. One change order on a governmental project. And this man should be honored in all halls for bringing in a project without any change orders to this point in time. Well, we're almost done. And nobody, so, I mean, we are doing all of the right things here, and it started with being very cautious and careful in our budgeting, taking it to market before we brought it to the community to make sure that the numbers were correct, and then watching them twice, and then watching these numbers like a hawk all the way through the process. And that's how you get it done the right way.
And good project management.
Awesome project.
There's daily attention to the detail, right? That's how that happens.
The collaboration of our engineering department and our professional engineers and architects has been marvelous, and it's been a joy to watch it because they've all been focused on doing the right thing and not blowing the budget. So, thank you, Jim. Thank you. I'm done. Now I'll go crawl back in my hole for the rest of the day. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, thank you, President Ritchford. That was very kind of you, and it's a combination effort between a lot of folks. But we're happy with the project, and I have a special treat for you in my engineering budget to just take a step back and actually look at the commitment to what the village has actually done. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started here with the engineering department. I'm pleased to present you our proposed 2024 budget. The next few slides will provide an overview of the engineering department's roles, responsibilities, and the programs we'll be looking to undertake in 2024. So this slide shows the organizational chart for the engineering department. Also highlighted are the proposed enhancements to the department in 2024, and with that, if I can find the right button, there's two positions we're going to be talking about. There's a proposed construction project manager position and a proposed sustainability coordinator position as part of this. The department is currently comprised of 4.5 full-time employees in both engineering and the forestry divisions, and a portion of the customer service representative. The department also includes 2 summer interns, contractual engineering services, and a part-time GIS operator who works 2 days a week. Based on the engineering department's enhanced future capital programs, the continued ongoing daily work, activities including residential inspections and permit reviews, the engineering department is seeking the addition of a new position. This position is proposed to be classified as a construction project manager. This position will assist with the oversight of the many ongoing construction and capital projects that we've talked about here and some coming up in the future. They'll assist with residential inspections that the engineering department performs, construction document oversight, which goes in line with what President Rintz just indicated. That's our attention to detail. Contract development as we work forward on the new contracts, and direct oversight of our summer engineering interns. So the addition of this position will also allow the engineering department to begin providing more hands-on oversight of the ongoing stormwater projects in the residential neighborhoods as we start to switch away from the conveyance project or the storage projects to the conveyance projects, which we would typically classify as our standard capital project. The oversight will help reduce the need for ongoing daily resident engineering services provided by consultants that we pay right now. This is a cost savings to the village in the long run as we start to move forward with those projects. In addition, the engineering department is recommending a new position as well, and this is the position of the sustainability coordinator. I think most of us have heard that term here recently with the comprehensive plan. This position will lead and facilitate sustainability initiatives as envisioned in the 2040 comprehensive plan, identify and pursue grant opportunities, and collaborate with other Winnetka government bodies to advance sustainability initiatives. This position would also serve as a liaison to the Environmental Forestry Commission, attend meetings, and provide technical assistance. I believe that the addition of these critical positions will help ensure the consistent reliability of staff, oversight during critical projects, help to improve construction communication as we move through these projects, and help to advance the environmental needs of the community as well. So the next two slides here focus on an overview of the department, some of the roles and responsibilities of our team. I'll highlight just a few of these. Again, we've seen most of these before. We prepare and develop in-house our own annual street rehabilitation program. We do that design work in-house. We prepare plans and specifications and coordinate bidding of capital projects, some related to stormwater as well. Execute and manage our annual programs in-house, again, including the road rehabilitation, our annual sidewalk replacement, pavement patching, pavement striping, coordinate efforts with the Public Works Department, and then as alluded to, we assist in seeking grant funding for our capital projects as well. Again, continuing on, we oversee the village's CRS program. This is the Community Rating System program. This is initiated through FEMA, which is a National Flood Insurance Program. This helps to provide reductions in flood insurance premiums for our residents that are within the floodplain limits. We do have a full audit coming up this year, so with all the investments that the community has done, we're looking to take advantage of that to improve our current ranking from a 6, hopefully down to a 4, but at least a 5. Every change in reduction of number offers an additional 5% reduction in flood insurance premiums. So our goal is to keep getting as low as we possibly can, and in the future, when we get completed, be the leader in the northeastern part of the United States, or Midwestern United States, excuse me. We, of course, manage our GIS program, and then included with us in the engineering department is the forestry. Now, this division, which is a one-person show right now, includes our annual tree planting, tree pruning and removals, commercial plantings and maintenance, and of course, private inspections. So this slide here shows you some of our accomplishments for 2023. You've probably seen most of these. There's the Willow Road, the Hibberd Project, Elm Street. David alluded to the site improvements at 93 Greenberry Road. Again, our sidewalk program and the street rehab program. So with that, I have a little treat. Tim, if I can get on here without, there we go. I have a little short video of a project for the North of Willow to kind of demonstrate here some of the benefits of what this work is doing and the amenities that have been created now for the residents here in Winnetka. So just a little short preview of some of the stuff. This imagery was actually taken towards the end of October. As you could see, the 18-hole golf course is really grown in. Now, if we can keep people off of it until it really grows in, that'd be great. And then the part 3 as well. There you go. Get past it, unless we all want to watch it one more time. So again, this slide covers some of the accomplishments for the year. You've all seen some of this. I really won't go through this again. What I will say, though, with the completion of the North of Willow project, as President Rintz indicated, that project came in on time, under budget, slightly under budget, to be exact. It took a lot of effort from a lot of people and a lot of support. So we from staff, thank you for the support that you offer us as we move through that. As part of this list, also, one of the accomplishments here is the completion of our public sidewalk program. I would just preference, though, we get questions about our public sidewalk, and last year we replaced over 10,000 square feet of sidewalk throughout the town, just doing general maintenance on it, so we always look at opportunities to improve upon that. And again, we completed, as I indicated before with Mark, we completed the annual sewer relining program. That completed the high and medium parts of that. We've completed a bunch of plan reviews. We pruned in the forestry department over 2,200 trees. We planted 185. We removed 185 and we planted 175 with more to come. And then also just outside this building, we completed the landscaping plantings and enhancements at the Moffett Mall, as well in coordination with the Winnetka Garden Club, and also the installation of that new fountain out there as well. So getting into some of our goals, for the next year. The first slide here, I'll highlight again. We'll be looking to do our annual street rehabilitation program again. We do this in collaboration with the Water and Electric Department, and I would be remiss without saying a big thank you to Brian and Nick, and then also the Assistant Director of Engineering, Mr. Obed Khalid, as we develop that program. It's a huge undertaking in the coordination efforts, but the cost savings are substantial. So I say thank you for those folks helping as we move along. We'll be looking again to hit on the Crow Island storage project, complete the Hibbert Preserve. I've sort of talked about that. We will be awarding a contract for the east side evaluation, and then be looking to develop the new I&I program for the rest of the city. So we'll continue to assist with some of the grant funding as well. We want to continue with the future design for the phases for the stormwater conveyance project. I take a step back, though, to go back to the discussion about the grants. The key component that we've heard time and time again as we apply for grants is, are you shovel ready? There's a lot of funding out there that goes untouched unless you're ready to go. And the fact that the village has committed the funds to get the designs shovel ready and on shelves, it really helps our opportunities as we pursue those grants to help pay for these projects. We're again looking to continue investing in our current infrastructure, replace a little over 11,000 linear feet of curbs and over 18,000 square feet of public sidewalk for next year. We'll continue assisting with plan reviews with our new staff members and the staff that we have. And again, assist with obtaining those permits. We'll be looking to advance the design for the proposed enhancements to the Green Bay Trail, should the funding become available. For the Forestry Department, again, they'll be looking to continue to advance those programs that we currently undertake with tree pruning, tree trimming, tree plantings, and again, continuing to manage our overall planting programs. So this slide here is an overview of our annual street rehabilitation program. As we had indicated before, in the previous years, our budget was $1.6 million. This year, we were requesting a $100,000 increase, and this is primarily due to the cost for overall construction. We haven't asked for an increase for this program for almost 4 to 5 years. As we continue to coordinate with the Water Department on the replacement of the water infrastructure, the repairs that normally we wouldn't have to undertake now get a little bit more extensive. It's nothing against the program, it just requires more repair than we normally do. So the funding, we've been trying to manage as best we can with the funding that we had, but we've gotten to that break point where we're no longer allowed to continue to contribute towards those roadways that just need some TLC, a little resurfacing, that aren't part of a water project. So this additional funding, we believe, will help get us there. and maintain our current rating, which, as you may recall, we utilize a program called, from IMS, called a Pavement Condition Program. It's a non-destructive one, and we get a rating of how our roadways are compared to surface condition appearance, the constructability of it, et cetera. And then based on the village's fiscal commitment, we're still maintaining our overall ranking of a 76, which, by the way, I would note is the highest in northeastern Illinois from communities that use this. So the commitment is there, and this demonstrates that we're getting the rate of return on maintaining our infrastructure. Some of the complications that come along as we develop these programs, of course, are capital projects. Stormwater being one. We've looked at certain roadways, Cherry Street, Oak Street, the streets you're going to be working on to put these new box culverts in. We've had to postpone them so that when we do the roadway work, we don't want to go and do it and then come and take it all back out. So it's that coordinated effort. We have multiple building construction projects, as you're all aware. There's lots of times where we resurface a road, and within 2 years later, we call them bullet holes throughout there from new construction that takes place. So we try to take that into consideration. And of course, weather plays a factor. Some of these roads deteriorate quicker during these colder climates and severe snow events. Knock on wood, we haven't had too many recently, so let's hope this is good. And again, as we prepare these, we do our cost projections based on estimates of programs we see in the market. We speak with our private consultants, other communities. We keep our eyes on what people are paying for those rates, so to make sure that when we come to you and ask for dollars, that we're working within a realistic approach. So this exhibit here shows the location of where our proposed streets are for next year. As you can see, we got a certain area located just east of the downtown area, but not affected by the work we'll be doing as part of the stormwater improvements in the tree streets. And then a large resurfacing component along Wilson there that needs some TLC. It's been needed for a little while. So this exhibit shows the estimations of the cost. This is how we break it down per street location. As you can see at the bottom, there is a commitment from the water department. They have a little over $1.7 million. That'll be of water main work that we'll be coordinating as we work on our little $1.7 million budget. The roadway costs that you see here are slightly higher than the 1.7 that we've asked. That's okay, because we try to use conservative numbers when we develop this component, but we will make sure that whatever contractors award, it's within budget and below the 1.7 million. So here you'll see the financial summary here for the engineering department. This slide shows the proposed changes for the year. Salaries and benefits have gone up slightly. This is due to the addition of the new personnel that we had requested. This was an increase. Service and supplies are proposed at a little over $840,000, which is slightly higher than the department's budget last year. The biggest change is the addition. We carried $35,000 for a coastal engineer. Now, this is an ad-needed one, but this wasn't carried last year, so that got added. And then the $100,000 increase that we asked for the street rehabilitation program. Those are the big driving factors. This increase, again, is due to the market and what we're seeing out here. The total operating expense, this also includes a little over $580,000 for the forestry department operating budget, which includes programs and services that we discussed here briefly. Primarily, these programs have not had any increase. The program only gets increased slightly as the programs develop. As a commercial district area, plantings get a little bit bigger, the programs and the cost to maintain that gets slightly a little bit more. But overall, it's been very consistent. And then finally, the capital outlay for the engineering department is proposed a little over 1.9, excuse me. This is a total increase request of a little over $29,000 from the previous years. Again, the key factors here on the capital component is our $130,000 for our sidewalk replacement program, and then of course the $1.7 million for the annual street rehabilitation program. Did it switch? Oh, there we go. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have for the engineering department.
I had a note, sidewalk replacement's gone from 200 to 150 down to 120 budgeted next year. Is that just because we're nearing the end of replacing our sidewalks, or you're, taking a little bit out of sidewalk replacement to fund other projects?
Yes.
Okay.
We're trying to be fiscally conservative, and to be honest, we carry 120,000 for sidewalk replacement. That's just moving, replacing, and then we carry 30,000 for new sidewalk types of a program. We typically find that we're not using the whole 30,000, although there are projects that all of a sudden come up and we use all of it plus. So this year, we decided to be aggressive and focus more so just on the replacement, removal and replacement of existing. So we reduced a little bit there to help offset some of the costs for our street rehab program that really covers where we need it to go right now.
See, Bob, another way the private streets save you money on sidewalks.
We'll get to that.
I'm trying.
All right.
Exactly.
So Jim, I'm interested in this, in the sustainability, the new FTE, whatever it's,
Sustainability coordinator.
coordinator.
Yep.
And I appreciated the EFC chairman sending a note on that, and he's terrific, and that group is actually terrific, and they've been talking at length about how to interact with other commissions, and so is that position, as I think about it, and you mentioned that position could be involved in grant making, applications and so on and so forth.
Right.
As you look at that position in other communities, is that a position that clearly pays for itself? I mean, there are other qualitative benefits to it, but does it pay for itself in terms of efficiency with other departments and obtaining grants, or how do we view that position? Is it just overhead, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna defer to the HR department on that one.
HR
I turned on my mic in anticipation of this question. So we did a lot of research, and to answer your question, it's a very new role in many of our neighboring communities. So when we researched implementing that provision in the comprehensive plan this year with this new position, we observed that most municipalities created this position within this last year. So there's not a lot of data to specifically answer your question about is it cost neutral, with the idea that grants certainly could be applied for, and if achieved, that's hopefully the goal, but it's just too soon with the newness of this role to have the data to definitively answer that question.
Is there a description of the position that would incorporate some of those elements of the job that might result in obvious financial benefits?
Yes.
Again, I think there are many benefits that cross over the village. I mean, I actually think it's a really interesting position.
So we did it clearly, as Tim mentioned, when we budget for grants, we have to know that the grant is likely to be received. So we certainly did not budget revenue related to this position.
No, I understand.
But we do have a draft job description based on how we see the role serving here in Winnetka, that should the council support adding this new role, we would refine. And grants would definitely be included in that job description.
Is that a description that can be shared with council members?
Sure. I guess, Bob, I look at this too and see if this is so new in other areas like Kenilworth or Glencoe, if they're doing that, why can't we look at sharing, at least as we dip our toes in with other communities? Because it's not going to be that different between Glencoe, Kenilworth, Wilmette, those type of communities. It's something we can share.
Well, I know that the Wilmette job description, for example, they partnered with other Wilmette agencies to share the position. But when we looked at making this proposal, it was important to us to be able to sustain and control the job responsibilities and the workflow of the position. When you have a shared position, while there may be financial benefits, there is difficulty, especially in a new role that's being formed, reporting to multiple different agencies and objectives. So we looked at this as fulfilling the council's 2040 comprehensive plan directive and having the ability to lead and have control over the job responsibilities and outcomes.
Well, again, I think there's no shortage of work for that person, whatever it is. But I think it would be good to know what the expectations are. I mean, it's kind of a position that, you know, has a lot of potential to it, but I'm, you know, I'd kind of like to see, I'm all for it, but I'd kind of like to see what you're expecting from the role.
We certainly could route as a follow-up the draft job description that we have formulated.
Good.
It needs refinement, but it's in pretty good spot. We did have discussions with I think Northbrook has had the position longer than anyone, and then Wilmette came on thereafter. And I think the experience we heard from Wilmette is making sure the person knows clearly who they report to and who they're working for. There may be some opportunities, if we're working with other sister taxing agencies, to seek a contribution once the position is, you know, really vetted and showing its worth, but wouldn't want to promise that yet.
I'm curious, I got to believe in other places, they've had these positions longer maybe than in Illinois, because I think, who made the recommendation before the Plan Commission to include it? Was it Kunkel? Yeah, I think she was one of the big advocates. So like, is there examples of this in California or in Virginia, I think?
You may very well be right that nationwide, it has been a trend longer than it has been in Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
So in our research, we focused on the Midwest and Northern Illinois. We did not go as far as California or Virginia, but we certainly could take a look at those opportunities which may have been in existence for a longer duration.
Okay.
Any other questions for me? Okay, from the engineering department, well, thank you for your support this year, and we'll continue to keep working hard for you. And if you want to ask if I need anything else, Trustee Dearborn, like fire and police.
You're getting a new position.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for it.
Bob wanted me to say that we've run out of money, we're all done now.
I was going to tell you, we do provide electricity on private streets.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian?
We appreciate that.
Let's just take 5 minutes for
No,
everybody to-
perfect. Chris, President Rentz, should we begin?
Let's roll.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to present the budget. Joining me today is Assistant Director Nicholas Nari. Nick's going to be presenting the water fund budget, and for both funds, Nick and I work cooperate with our superintendents. So I have 3 superintendents, 2 at the plants and 1 on the operations side. So a lot of input goes into the budget. We're tasked with providing electricity and getting it delivered to your house economically and reliably for both the residents and commercial customers in Winnetka. And as mentioned in some of the previous dialogue, the electric fund is an enterprise fund, so it subsists by the sale of electricity and providing service. It's not funded by the general fund. The budget is a little over $23 million, and a little over half of that is purchase power cost. Organizationally, we're 34 and a half equivalent full-time people in the organization. There's a part-time plant clerk, that's the half. These positions are funded across both the water fund and the electric fund. I won't read verbatim from the slides, but again, this year we completed a full complement of maintenance. So things that you see as a resident, the tree trimming, we have a contractor that does thermography looking for hot spots. We did complete a substation project across from President Rentz's house where we actually put in a clean agent fire suppression system that completes the last of the substations or load centers. So we're on Chief Ripka's good side now. We completed, closed out the new Trier Gymnasium projects. We had some reconfiguration work to do this year that completed that. And then similar to on the water fund, we do water main replacement. The electric fund's been in a better situation. We do actually cable replacement in the conduits throughout the village. This year we targeted a lot on the 5 kV system. Year to date, we had 8 dispatch events. That's not singular or 8 days. That's generally a multi-day event, but the plant responded to 8. That's lower than most years. I think a welcome relief to the plant staff. And then we've responded to 24 outage events year to date. Next year, we're looking at, we've got a lot of project work coming up from our peers in the school community. So we have, as you know, you've pre-approved probably, I think, 5 transformers for District 36 and North Shore Country Day projects that are on order. So we have projects where we'll be installing new transformers. Most of it's HVAC upgrades that they need a new electric service. Tim, we've spent a lot of time on the metering. We're launching the automated metering, both water and electric fund are part of that. The maintenance, and then the last piece is the generating equipment. So won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but as I've told you before, we're going to be bringing back to you probably January, maybe December, the 2 pieces, and I referred to it as the engine and the transmission. So in this case, it's the turbine and the boiler. The budget for the generation includes repairs in 24, the turbine, and in 25, the boiler. That's all loaded in to the 5-year capital plan. Before we ask you to proceed with that plan, we're going to bring you cost estimates for both, because I don't want to replace, again, using my analogy, we're not going to replace the engine and come back to you and say, we don't have a transmission now, you need to do that, without you knowing you got to do both pieces. We've covered a lot of this. Again, so we're going to continue to do new business. We're going to be looking at launching the AMI system, and we're going to continue with cable replacement. So sales is what drives the revenue. So we budgeted last year a little over 121 million kilowatt hours. It looks like we'll come in less than 120, closer to the 117,000 kilowatt hours. Most of that's weather related. We use 2 prior years and then the current year to build the next year's projection. So we're looking at projecting 120,434,000 kilowatt hours for our sales next year. I think looking forward, we're still on an upward slope on the trend line, but I think it's starting to flatten out. Now, the question we'll see is with the new school projects, One Winnetka, some of the planned developments, will the pitch kind of go back up a little bit? That's possible. Right now, it's kind of leveling out. So a lot of numbers on this slide. This is taken from the financial summary that's in the budget book. I'm going to call a couple things to your attention, and then we'll delve into things like the capital in more detail. So total expenses are up by 2.2%, which is a very modest increase, to be candid. IMEA has done a great job, and you're going to see this managing our wholesale power costs this year. And so we're actually we're projecting a lower power cost for next year. We're going with the same unit price, but because I mentioned we're projecting lower sales, purchase power cost is actually down a little bit. Capital budget is 3.8 million, which is an increase of 1.6 million. And then total revenue is up 5.2%. Now we're looking at a higher rate increase, but again, we're projecting lower sales. So you've got numbers going against each other. So we'll start, the last year's budget was 3.7, and we came in we're expected to come in at 2.4 in a capital perspective. And the difference, before Trustee Dearborn asked me, is largely 2 projects, is we didn't do the turbine overhaul, which is $650, I believe, and we had the pier, $300 million. We made some temporary repairs to the pier this year, but the main rebuilding effort was not done. So that's almost $1 million right there in those 2 projects that did not happen in 2023. From the cash fund balance, I want to go back 1 minute because I missed an important part, and I'll come back. So on the line here, you'll see a transfer in and out. Tim mentioned, I think, a little bit of this in the beginning, but to focus on it, to meet the fund balance policy, there's a proposed transfer of $1.25 million from the water fund to the electric fund as a loan. And so you'll see that on the second line there, transfers in and out, it's $1.25 million. You're going to see that on the water fund slide when Nick presents it, leaving the water fund. It's a loan between the 2 funds. Where you're going to see it on this slide here is that the auditor results were closing out at $6.2 million for the year of 2022. We're estimating that we're going to close this year at the 2023 at 6.6. With the loan of 1.25, we're projecting to close in 2024 at 6.5. Now, if you take the 1.25 off, we'd close at 5.3 million. 5.3 million is below the 4 months operating capital that you ask us to maintain, which is the 6.4 million. So to meet the fund balance policy, we're proposing this loan. In the absence of the loan, the electric fund still has $5.2 million of funds, but it's below the fund balance policy. So that's a important piece of the financials that's moving through the undertone of the electric fund, and you're gonna again see it in the water fund. Any questions while we're at that piece?
Brian, I'm trying to remember, there was, a few years ago, there was like
Yes. So this is not unusual where we've done, your question was we've done loans before. So you may remember the general fund loaned the water fund $1 million.
Yeah.
It was a 4-year loan. We paid it off in 3 years. And generally what happens is the loan amount is set at an equivalent to the IEPA rate as far as what the interest that's charged to the borrowing fund. So we did $1 million to the water fund. Tim, you have to help me. Was it 2017 or 2018, I believe?
Yeah, it was, I believe, in 2017.
Yeah, are we gonna structure a similar arrangement?
It's the way the cash flow is set up, we have $1.25 million in '24, and then another $1 million in '25, and then it goes back in '26 and '27 in the same amounts. So it's to smooth out, there's some excess cash flow in the water fund. There's some heavy capital load up front in electric, and it just to smooth
But I
things out.
remember in the loan before, from the general fund or whatever, that there was an interest rate, there was interest paid. Are we gonna do that again?
Yeah, so I think we envisioned an interest rate that was going to be at the same as what we've done before, which is established like at the IEPA infrastructure rate.
Why don't you borrow from the sanitary sewer fund?
I don't run the sanitary sewer fund.
I love your honesty, Brian, thank you.
Mark said no.
Mark said no?
No.
Okay, so it's gonna be,
He said no.
so we're gonna have a loan document between the
Well, the
funds?
No, it's not going to be a formal loan.
It's
It's just a short-term transfer cash flow needs. We don't, as Brian said, there is sufficient cash balances, but it is something that the auditors see. And we'll pick it up and they'll say, hey, you have a policy, you didn't meet the policy, and now you got a little ding on your audit. So to avoid that, we're doing the short-term, transfer between funds to kind of smooth out the cash flow.
So when I look at this, we are going below the fund balance policy, but we're at 5 million without the loan. So it's, in the scope, there is sufficient funds there. We have a lot of capital that we can't defer, the generation repairs, potentially 1.4 plus in a boiler. As those things become more clear on what the direction we're going and what those dollar amounts are, that'll provide some more certainty in the 5-year plan.
Brian, what would have happened if we had spent the budgeted amount last year, this year? Would we have drawn our fund balance below the minimum?
Well, there's some overlap because the turbine 4 was in last year's budget for an overhaul. This year it's an overhaul / and a repair. So there's a little bit, 650,000 is probably is similar expense in the 2 years. So if we would have spent it all, it might not have been a double spend in the way that you're envisioning it might have happened.
Okay, I'm sorry, we didn't spend $1.3 million last year.
Correct.
Correct. If we had spent that, would our fund balance have been 5.2 million right now?
That's the number I have to ask.
Yeah,
question.
so the policy changes obviously as your expenses change throughout the year. So when it gets down to the audit, they do what your actual expenditures, and our policy amount for '23 is 5.7 million. Add that expenditure and we would have dipped slightly below our policy threshold.
Are you suggesting that our policy minimum is too tight?
No, actually, I don't want to say the rate study because we've
don't-
had a
don't
lot of
say rate
discussion.
study.
We've had a lot of discussion about the policy in general. From a Winnetka specific policy, I think the council and staff are comfortable with 4-month operating.
Okay.
If you went to a electric fund rate study consultant, they would advise you to go more than 4 months. We've actually collectively, I think, I'll speak for myself, and I'm getting at least one nod because he sat through the rate study. I think we felt that with the funds across all the Winnetka funds, where you could make inter-fund loans, that 4 months is appropriate, because I could go to the sanitary fund if I had to. But no, in putting the jokes
Unless we draw
aside,
it down.
putting the jokes aside, it was that there's sufficient reserves across the village funds, including the general fund, that 4 months for an operating enterprise fund is sufficient and has been demonstrated to be sufficient.
It provides discipline. I mean,
Correct, we're managing to this. But if you went, to answer your question, if you went to a larger entity, they'd say potentially you'd go more than 4 months. Now, I can say that some of my peers are at less than 4 months.
less than 4 months. Okay.
And some of your peers don't generate, though.
That's true, and some of my peers are larger than me that I'm referencing, and we're going to be, we're catching them on fund balance. I got it. The electric fund, so in addition to when we're looking at this transfer, we're looking at, as Tim mentioned, the assessment of the financials of the expense and the capital work. To make it work this year, we're looking at a 9.7% increase. And so that's really Winnetka-specific work. Because remember, I told you the power cost is flat at the unit price, actually going down a little because we're projecting less sales. So this increase is really what's being driven from the cost of maintaining the system and the proposed capital work. It's on average across all the rate classes, 9.72. For residential customers, 9.7, and I've got some more information on how that breaks out for the typical residential customer. So a lot of information on this slide, and we'll kind of work our way from the top down. The current rates, so a monthly charge for our current vast majority of customers are single phase. It's $19.15 a month. For your service charge, it would go to $20.87. You're then charged a volumetric component, so how much electricity you use. In the winter, it's 14.2 cents. That's going to move to 15.7 cents. In the summer, you're currently paying 15.23 cents, and that'll move to 16.7. When you look at a typical customer, and typical for Winnetka is around 17,000 kilowatt hours a year. That's a sizable amount of energy. The typical customer is going to pay $273.79 more if they're using around 17,000 kilowatt hours. So it's a difference of about $23 a month. What was the increase last year? Tim, do you know off the top?
The increase last year, 9 was 8%.
Come again?
8%? Let's confirm that.
So the chart on the bottom, we've historically compared to ComEd. So I've added some detail this year to help, well, not even to help, but to explain kind of how some things have moved, because it's moved favorably this year from our power price. So far right, far left, straight up rates, no power cost adjustment, should have been around $2,872 for the typical resident. The rate structure that's on the resolution says that if power price comes in lower than budgeted, there's a power cost adjustment. So either it's a credit if it's lower, or if it comes in higher, that we can recapture the difference. This year they've trended low, so there's actually, the typical resident came in lower than the actual rate, so they came in at closer to $2,717. ComEd 2023 rate, that's what we were comparing ourselves to, what happened for ComEd in 2023. So ComEd was projected to come in at $2,764, and their rate structure, they have a purchase electricity adjustment, so likewise it can go up and down. Theirs actually dropped a little there, closer to $2,682. Winnetka rate to Winnetka rate, so far left to the far right, we're going to go from $2,873 to the $3,146. There's going to be some level of adjustment on the ComEd rate. I've adjusted what it's been publicized in the ComEd rate for 2023. That's what we're paying as what I'm paying as a ComEd customer. There is still one rate case before the Commerce Commission that would have to be announced. It's been publicized as about $6.72 for the typical customer. Winnetka customer is not really typical to the ComEd customer, so it's going to be, when you compare it, some number north of $6.72 if they get the rate increase. So again, it highlights purchase power of the 7.9 cents. That's the same number that was on last year's slide. The purchases are going to be a little bit higher than the number. So if you're comparing the number I'm giving you here to the first slide, purchases are higher than sales because there's about 5% loss in the system. So you buy more than what you're going to buy for your 5% more than what your sales are. So I'm going to speak about some of the consulting services because there's some items that are going to generate presentations to the front of the council at some point in time. In 2024, IMEA will be approaching all 32 communities to begin a contract renewal process. We'll likely have 12 to 16 months to make a decision if we're going to extend our contract from 2035 to some number into the future, probably 2050. You may want to have some consultant help you make that decision. So I've budgeted $60,000, so if we need to get outside expertise. All 32 members are going to get the same contract and have the same amount of time to make their decision. The reason you're being asked to make that decision in 24 and maybe going into the beginning of 25 is the runway is not long enough to go into projects, solar, 20-year purchase power agreements. The agency only actually exists for another 12 years. It ends at 2035. So to start making financial arrangements for, say, it's a solar project, a purchase power agreement, they want to do 20-year purchase power agreements, not the agency, but the entity selling the power. They don't want to go into relationships for a 12-year period. That's not very typical. Or if they do it, it comes at a higher cost. So the agency is really out of runway from what's left in our collective contracts. So they're going to be approaching the members to make a decision. So when you make the decision, you're still in through 2035. The question will be what Winnetka wants to do for power supply from 2035 and beyond. That will likely start, that discussion will begin in 2024, and that's what that wholesale power contract renewal consultant services is for. Moving down the list, you'll likely remember that we are currently in an air permit renewal cycle for the power plant. So we submitted in 2022. We continue to operate on our existing air permit. When the IEPA actually picks it up, they're going to have lots of questions. And in the past, that's required professional engineering services and an environmental attorney to help us navigate that response. That's something that Elrod Friedman does not provide, and we've worked that out separately. So we've budgeted for that. We've carried contingency funding for additional discussion on telecom undergrounding. We're looking at an arc flash study, which is related to making sure that we have the appropriate PPE for our employees when they're working in front of energized electrical equipment. AMI supporting dollars if we need additional consulting. And then the last, engineering system protection is contingency. So if there's some technical matter that goes beyond our staff's level, we have funding to go outside. And permitting is we generally need professional services for submitting regulatory air permitting documents. That's the not the new renewal, that's the biannual reports. I'll move through this page much faster. This is generally to give you a sense of the maintenance work that's in our expense accounts. We're doing line clearance, we're doing thermography, wood pole inspections, cleaning switchgear. The new item on this list this year is we're requesting funding both in water and electric to outsource some of our utility locating. We're doing over 4,400 Julie tickets a year. That's the tickets, and we're probably putting in the busier months 2 to 3 people full-time on doing Julie locates, which that means they're either not getting developed as a lineman, our apprentices are doing this, or we're not getting other work done. So we've had preliminary discussions with one firm. We could outsource some of our Julie locating, and I say some, there's some that they will not do. They will not locate streetlights in the central business district because they have to clamp onto an energized cable to find it, and they will not let their technicians do that. They will not locate cables in duct lines or around substations, because again, to locate those, someone's going in a manhole and putting a sensor on a piece of energized cable. The cable that runs from a pole to your house, they don't have to touch any energized conductor, and they can sweep the area and find it with a tool and say, okay, I can mark this reasonably comfortable. So this is only outsourcing a portion of our utility locating, trying to get out from doing all 4,400 plus tickets a year and getting, let's say, pretty much it's our younger linemen doing line work as opposed to locating underground cables. It's a regulatory requirement for us to either pay someone to do it or locate it ourselves, because we, in the state of Illinois, utilities have to locate their facilities. On the electric plant side, there's a lot of maintenance. It's an old plant. I've been in front of you before. This is a list of the projects that the plant staff has identified that we need to be addressing to keep the plant operating. So the DA tank is a deaerator tank that removes dissolved oxygen and carbon dioxide from the water. Two projects I'd call your attention is we're going to need to do pond dredging again, and we're also going to need to on the new valve that we put in on the intake pond, we need to not only dredge some of the sand out of that immediate area, but we need to camera it. We've got an abnormal amount of sand coming in from somewhere. And to the fact that it's actually working its way back into the wet well at the water plant, and we actually, in the sedimentation basins, seen increased amounts of sand. So we're getting sand in the intake system in places it has not been historically. So next year, we're going to not only have to do some cleaning, but we're going to have to do some camera inspections. The rest of that, the only other thing I'd say that's kind of two other items I'd call are different than my normal. We're doing some security improvements. That's $22,500 split across the two funds. And next year, we're going to put an inspector on the actually exhaust stack to make sure that there's no needed repairs on that. And that would include not only the exterior, but going on the inside. There's a gunite lining on the inside of that stack due to the heat from the exhaust gases, so they'll go in and inspect that. Just some highlights to give you a sense of the other utility categories. Streetlights, there's some money budgeted for deteriorated poles. Try to keep up with our friends at the fire department and make sure the preemption is working at the intersections. We've got some substation maintenance work. So tap changer is the electrical contacts that move to regulate voltage. So they wear out over time, the contacts. So this would be opening up the tap changer compartment on the substation transformer and replacing those contacts, or at least checking them, make sure they're still in spec. And the transformer 71 bushing repair is, actually the repair itself is not that big of an item to address, but you have to drain a part of the transformer oil out to get it low enough so you can make a repair where we have a small leak on a sensor. And so they have to lower the oil level in the transformer to get to that, to be able to effectively to address the leak. Now, the capital plan, so some of these items are already mentioned in my introductory remarks. So turbine 4 is budgeted for a repair and an overhaul, but will be brought back as a package with the boiler repair that's planned for 2025. They're going to be taking the lid off. You've already approved an inspection contract. That was $168,000. So they'll be pulling the lid off that turbine number 4. Actually, they start next week. It's 2 weeks of work. So we'll have that opened up. I know I have some meetings with some trustees coming up. You'll have an opportunity to probably see the inside of that. Hot well pump is a pump that moves water from the condensate tank back into the system. We've got one that needs to be overhauled. Pier repair, carrying that forward, as I think we've reported previously. We did not have a lot of success identifying someone that wants to help us with dealing with the end of the pier, so we're casting that net again. The plant load center transformer replacement is the start of replacing the transformer. So when you drive down the hill at the power plant, there's those large transformers in the fenced-in area. Some of those are beyond their book life, getting to the end of their age life. So we've gotten bids. We're in the process of bidding it. We have the bids now, and we're working through the technical issues. That transformer is about $520,000. We'll be required to make progress payments if we enter into a contract for that. It would be delivered in 2025. Have budgeted money to do, if we move forward with that purchase, that we'd have progress payment money in the budget for 2024. Tim's already talked about AMI. The Northfield Substation Transformer, that project's in service and complete. I'll call it the punch list items are not complete to our satisfaction, so I've withheld payment in the amount of $172,000. At some point when these are resolved, we'll still have one last payment on that transformer. And we have some maintenance work on the electric plant, that's the brick repair, and then we're planning to budget a single circuit breaker in one of our load centers is $50,000. So we're planning to budget one of those next year. That's the plan, is to do one a year for the next 20 years. And continuing on, this is the first item's cable, conductors, transformers, switchgear, and devices. That's very typical plethora of stuff that we need to do to provide maintenance work and new business connections. One notable item is directional boring for the same scope of work nearly doubled. So this was competitively bid. The two bidders were, I think, the closest I've ever seen a bid analysis come back for this type of work. That number is almost double what it's been historically as far as the cost. Now, unfortunately for our customers, this is a number that gets generally passed straight to the customer that's requesting the new business work. So District 36, unfortunately, the boring cost has doubled. Their price to complete that project, the electric work, is going to double the conduit portion. Similar to what Mark mentioned in the Public Works budget, trucks are a problem. Well, I think every department head here that has vehicles has mentioned it. We're looking to buy 3 new trucks. Candidly, I don't think it'll happen. I'm still waiting for a 2022 truck that was supposed to be delivered in 2023. It's the same type of truck that's listed on the first 2 lines there, the dump trucks. It's a Ford 550. We haven't got one that we ordered in December of 2022. So we'll probably seek your approval to buy these. Pretty good chance that they don't show up on the budget until the following year. And based on similar comments, if we can find one that's reasonably priced, that's maybe white versus yellow, then yeah, we'll be looking for those opportunities, because this is not going in a favorable direction as far as the vehicles. And then one last comment on the vehicles. You have, just to call back to your attention, you have 3 line trucks on order, 1 for the water fund and 2 for the electric fund. Those are coming in 25, 26, and 27. And if I could find a new one like Mark did, we'd be talking to you. So before I move from the podium and introduce Nicholas, is there any questions on the electric budget?
It's kind of sobering.
It's pretty sobering.
Yeah. So are we kind of thinking about 2 timeframes, now until 2035, in which case, I mean, we sort of have to repair everything that needs, I mean, what are our options here?
Well, so remember, from the generating perspective, that's our local decision through this whole process. That's always your decision. That's not a requirement from IMEA. What staff is looking at and what's in my longer range plan that we're working on with the village manager and Tim. So you ask, I think, we're looking at the 5+ plan. So we're looking at budgeting for diesels in year 6. So our air permit would typically be renewed for 5 years. Because of the age of our diesels, and I think we'll have challenges getting another permit cycle out of them beyond this 5-year one, so we started looking at replacement of the diesel generators 6 years out, 5 to 6 years out. Steam generation, we'll have more discussion, but until there's clarity on what's 2035 and beyond, is we're managing that fleet till 2035. That's how it's being approached now. Now, when I come back in December, January with the repairs, then we're going to have that discussion. Is 12 years enough time to recover the repair costs of boiler 4 and turbine 4?
Right, but if there's a potential, Brian, of re-upping with IMEA after 2035, wouldn't we want to have the generation capacity?
So what I don't know, even as a board member, is what the value they're going to convey for capacity credits in 2035 and beyond. So when we get that document, the contract template document, we'll then begin collectively be able to make some strategic direction about how we want to handle generation 2035 and beyond. I'm comfortable with the diesels for two reasons. One, with the way the market currently is, they can use that quick start capability, and it pays dividends to IMEA, but more importantly, we also need it for the water system. And it does also help us with the stormwater system if we had significant electrical issues from a delivery perspective. The steam units are not as clear because it takes 8+ hours to get them ramped up, and current marketplace for electricity doesn't want to wait 8 hours for power.
Right, but some of these repairs that you say are going to come in front of this group here, they may not make it to 2035. They might, we're going to have a decision once we get the contract with IMEA. Some of these decisions will be kind of dependent on what that decision is.
So nothing will change for the Village of Winnetka or the utility fund contractually for between now and 2035. This is only going to change September 2035 and beyond.
Right, but these decisions to keep this equipment going until 2035, whether or not we would want to do that might depend on what we're thinking about beyond 2035.
Okay, so let's back up.
Not to repair it.
On the
We're not
on the
obligated.
generators, and I'm going to repeat it just so, because I know people in the public works, the Village of Winnetka is not contractually obligated to run any generators for any period of time. It's solely your decision. You can step back from that at any point that you want. So when I bring a repair decision to you, things that I would be looking at is, what's the payback period? If we know when we bring it back, which we probably won't, what's beyond 2035, I would present it as, we're making a decision for, does this make sense between now and 2035?
Right, but if we decide not to do it, if we decide not to repair these units, to reduce our generation capacity.
Correct.
We're kind of committing to not have that generation capacity from 2035 on.
I think the agency would tell you that there's always they're not going to be required. Say you came back after we shut down a unit, and you came back and said, we want to put generation in, we'd have to go back to IMEA.
Yeah.
They would, in their best interest, be receptive to considering that. If it made sense for the whole, they would listen to that appeal. So I think if you change your mind and said, we're going to come back, I think it's not a closed door, but it would require some level of discussion.
How do you come back with new equipment?
Come back with new equipment, or contractually, when one unit's out of service for a year, unless we seek an extension, it drops off the books on their end. So then we'd be starting over anyway. We can do like-for-like replacement. So if we have 5 megawatts of diesels, and you gave me a check, go get 5 megawatts of diesels, I can do 5 to 5, no problems with the agency. We inform them, we got air permitting, but it's like for like. If we have 5 now, and you want to put 15 in, that requires a discussion.
Okay.
The crystal ball approach, the steam units, is the uncertainty. So you've got a plant that's really old, takes a long amount of time to get up to speed, boil the water, we had a discussion, the tea kettle analogy. The market doesn't react, like they're looking for a quicker turnaround. That's the part of the crystal ball that I'm really not sure how that's going to play out 2035 and beyond. The diesel units, I can't say with all definity, but the way the market is today, how they've been able to leverage our diesel units and how we need them for our water system, diesel generation is going to be in some shape or fashion part of the utility going forward.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of remember when you compared our costs to a resident to ComEd, that we've always been below ComEd.
We've been, over the little over 15 years, we've been above and below them. There's times where we've been above them.
It's
Well, now
easier,
we're-
it's easier to make this presentation when you're below them,
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Well, we're gonna be above them now.
You're gonna be above
Are
them.
we on a path now where we've demarcated from ComEd and we're going way above them in the next 10 years?
I don't know, that's difficult to predict because you don't know what the regulatory framework is for Illinois and what they're going to mandate onto ComEd.
But all things being equal, given the
I,
path we're
I
on.
really.
They're not
couldn't
equal, that's
speculate.
the whole problem, because what was their subsidy?
You know, what-
Exelon
Yeah,
subsidy?
so what he's references, Exelon got, the nuclear bailout. So there's a lot of legislative action, and there's things that they get legislated on that they're going to, that they're required to collect. So to predict how we'll bifurcate costs going in the future, I don't think I could give you an accurate answer on that.
Have we been 10 to 15% above ComEd in the past?
I'd have to go back and look, I honestly don't know.
Because I just don't remember that, but.
I think this doesn't include any projected rate increase for ComEd for '24 either, correct?
So, yeah, so the number I present to you is what's in place right now with ComEd and running it from all the way through 2023, what we know in October 24, or 23, excuse me, through the rest of the year. So this doesn't include anything that they might, rate increases that might be issued in 24.
The bottom line is if they lose their subsidy because of all the BS that's going on down in Springfield, that delta is going to have to come from somewhere. And if you've been watching Cranes, as I have over the last year, and seeing all the give and take that's been going on in Springfield relative to that, if they lose this huge subsidy, which is a direct write down to the customer, they're going to be above us.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge subsidy. I mean, I can't remember the number, Brian, but it was mind-boggling.
So there's I don't think an accurate way to predict what Springfield's going to do from the ComEd. So you got not only the legislative piece, but then now they're going back because of the financial situation. They're going back, they have to go to the Illinois Commerce Commission for the rates. It's not automatic rate making. So to project what's going to be the difference. The second part is we're carrying in the budget fully running we're planning on what's loaded into that 5-year plan is some significant repairs to continued operations of the plant. So that's what I was getting at. Your costs are going to remain there unless we decide to do something else. And the sales have dipped. Sales have tipped a little bit, but the line's up. But the line's still slightly upwards. Is that just? I can't imagine the consumer is just acting differently, or is it just more efficient? Well, we've had units, and because I mean, like we put in closed-cell foam, and my heater in the winter used to just go on every 30 seconds. And now, it just stays. Is it just more efficient homes and more efficient? I think you have more efficient homes at our individual level, but we've got a lot of planned development. So you've got basically, starting at the small end, 93 Green Bay Road was dormant. You've got the French Institute's going to be
so there should be
down. You've got a building that's across the street that's going to be coming before you. You've got a large residential property on Shared Road. When I say large residential property on Shared Road, that's really a business-sized transformation. You've got one Winnetka. You've got 4 to 6 projects with the schools, North Shore Country Day.
Okay.
So you've got load growth that's coming. Yes, we're built out, but you've got growth that's coming from your commercial institutes as well.
Okay.
And the other issue is that there's a big push on a national level to begin to extinguish burning things to heat our homes. And so more and more you're going to see as furnaces and heating units begin to age out, that they're going to be replaced with electric units.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw the big hubbub in New York about them just preventing, right? Now, whether that sticks or not is anybody's question, but the movement across the country is moving towards electric heat, because at least you're only burning stuff in one location rather than in thousands of locations. And that could be a game changer too as time moves forward.
We just got, I mean, when you look at the capital projects, we got some things that are stacking up on us. And in the case of Boiler 4 and Turbine 4, those are not items that we can defer. We're at a point where we're going to have to make a decision, fix or shut down.
And you
I
did
had-
a break even on that before though, Brian, and even with these repairs, we're still on the positive side relative to our.
All the previous presentations, to your point, is having the plant is reducing your wholesale power cost because of the capacity credits.
Right.
This goes back to when Trustee Kripe was here. Andy was real good at, we had a lot of discussion because that was a concern is, again, are we carrying this at a financial expense? And actually, the rates they showed is that it's actually keeping our bills, wholesale bill, lower. What we haven't seen is that this time we have not only a turbine overhaul, which is, now we have a repair, which I expect to be more than a general overhaul. This is the first time that we've got a boiler repair in front of us, and the boiler repair in 2025 is 1.4 million for one project. That's what we have not seen and was not contemplated in the 2017
Right.
rate study. That's kind of the start of a different situation.
And so for that one, you're going to come back, Tim will as well, say 1.4 million, the break even is whatever. That works over the 10-year period, and then even beyond that, it could work beyond that. I mean, are you going to look
Well,
at that kind of repair in 2 timeframes?
I think we can try to look at that time, but right now, unless there's definitively that you're going to get capacity credits beyond 2035, I think your certainty window is you're looking at stuff in the framework of 2035. The second part is, at some point, you have to expect that a 1946 generator, a 1953 generator has reached its end of its
Yeah,
useful life.
right.
So if the public and the council really wants to have a full-fledged generating plant, then we need to have that, take that, okay, what's new steam units look like? Or is it some other type of generation? I'm pretty comfortable telling you that we need to start planning for the diesel replacement because there's a lot of certainty around the need for that. And when I say diesel, it's probably a dual fuel natural gas / diesel, so you can use both fuel types. But the way the market is, the way the agency's been able to leverage it, and the water system needs, we're going to have to replace our diesels at some point. And right now, it's in our capital plan at year 6.
Well, what your decision might be, Brian, I mean, it could be conceptually that you say we don't want to expend this repair money, and we'll just use whatever would have gone to that to start reserving to buy new equipment starting in 2035, or what if we continued on? I mean, in other words, the decision may be to reduce our generating capacity, but still re-up with the IMEA with new equipment down the road that we start reserving for.
That's an option. So just to be clear, you're not going to have to make a decision on, you're not going to be put in a position where you're going to have to decide if we're going to renew the generation in order to re-up with IMEA. So in essence, you almost really have 2 separate contracts. You have your wholesale requirements contract to get your electricity delivered to you, and then you have a generating contract. That's where the capacity credits come from. Staff refers to it as the IMEA contract, but it's almost literally, probably from a legal perspective, 2 separate contracts. The contract that I referenced is coming back is you're going to have to vote on, and it'll probably be 12 to 16 months to analyze and make a decision. Do we want to sign up to get power from them from 2035 and beyond? And all 32 members will be in the same timeframe.
Well, and it could very well be that the consortium dissolves, right?
I would say, based on dialogue with my peer group, I don't see that happening.
Okay.
I would say there may be 1 to 3 that say they want to try something different, but
Okay.
I would say that there's highly unlikely it dissolves.
Okay. One of the things I saw on the slide, though, was the replacement of the transformers.
Yes.
Are we contemplating that there might be some environmental cleanup with PCBs?
So
Because
we
I've
don't,
got to believe they're of the age, right?
they're non-PCB transformers.
Oh, they
so
are?
they're mineral oil.
Okay.
They're in that gravel's got a liner of.
Okay.
So no, we're not aware that we're going to have any environmental cleanup. The transformer that we're spec'd out is actually not a mineral oil transformer. It's actually soybean oil is the insulating fluid. And the reason you spec that, not only it's more environmental friendly, but it has a fire protection.
Right.
Doesn't have the same
Okay.
flammability.
I guess I'd be curious what weighs into your decision. I know you have no crystal ball, but what will IMEA do? Which way can they go? Which will either be bad for us or good for us? And when will you think you'll know?
Well, I think right now, from everything I know, I think IMEA is good for you. Things are moving in a direction, they're moving more sustainably, they're moving into renewables, they're cutting their carbon footprint. When contracts come to close, they're moving into more renewable. Literally, the issue is to move to more, say, larger projects, you need a 20-year. I presented solar to this group, and we wrestled with the payback period on a solar project they're trying to do that on a massive scale, and they only got 12 years to do it. And so they can maybe make an arrangement to do a solar project in 12 years, but that results in abnormally high prices for the power that comes from that project. These developers want a customer that's going to buy a purchase power agreement for 20 years. And there's not 20 years left in our contract, so they cannot enter into that agreement.
More to come on this, for sure.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's important that we all understand that this is what's going to be on the agenda. I mean, we were hoping to have these conversations this year, but a lot of other stuff came up. But we have to get this in front of us, and we have to start doing it. And the sustainability coordinator could potentially be a piece of this that is really important, because we need somebody out there who isn't a volunteer commissioner, who is working this day in, day out to bring us the information we need for us to make the decisions that we need to make in the next year or two. And obviously, the contract coming through will definitely help us too. If it's really favorable on the capacity credits, I mean, that'll color the conversation one way. If it looks like we're going to get shortchanged on it, that'll obviously send us in a different direction. So, all right, let's get Nick up here, huh?
They're all warmed up.
Oh, this is easy, one page.
Try to keep it to a tight 5 here. Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Today I'll be presenting the Water Fund. So the Water Fund exists to supply potable water for the health and safety of Winnetka and Northfield residents, as well as residents in the unincorporated areas of Indian Hill, Woodley Woods, and Longmeadow. It's responsible for also the installation and repair of the water distribution system. The Water Fund operates as an enterprise business fund, and the budget for consideration before you today is about $8.5 million. So our accomplishments for 2023, we performed our standard battery of preventative maintenance on the water distribution system, which includes multiple cycles of leak detection, valve replacement, hydrant replacement, water meter replacement. We completed preventative maintenance at the water plant, including a dive inspection of our intake. This is the raw water intake that goes about a quarter mile into Lake Michigan, where we take the raw lake water to convert it into potable drinking water. We had a dive inspection, and we placed stones on that intake to help stabilize it due to the lake action, as well as cleaning our sedimentation basins. These are the basins that help the solids settle out of the drinking water. Those gets cleaned multiple times a year. We completed 36 water service connections. The bulk of these are for new single-family homes. We responded to 10 water main breaks at the close of September, and we completed 4 water main replacement projects, Streetscape Phase 5, just across the tracks, Cherry Street and Spruce Street, as well as Elm Street. I would note that between new construction, the voluntary lead service line replacement program, and road rehab, to date, we will have replaced 93 lead services. So that puts us ahead of schedule for our long-term replacement plan. Our goals and objectives for 2024 continue to adhere to our regulatory requirements as a potable water supplier, continue to install new service connections, continue removing lead service lines from our system as part of planned and emergent work. I would remind you that the state mandate, which is an unfunded mandate, dictates that we must remove all lead services off our system by the year 2038. So we do that through a variety of means. We do it on our road rehab projects. We have a voluntary program where next year we're hoping to address 80 lead services as well as emergent work. We're also going to adhere to our long-term capital replacement plan from the 2016-17 water main replacement plan study. For the new council members, this is a 100-year replacement plan where we replace about 1% of our system every year for the next 100 years. So that equates to about 3,500 feet of water main per year. And we're going to continue to invest in the water plant. Key budget items, as has been discussed by Director Keys and Director Sloth, we're going to launch the automated metering infrastructure project. We're going to do 3 water main projects next year, continue to replace lead service lines, new service installations, our standard preventative maintenance, and budget for emergent repairs on the water distribution system. This is a historic graph of our water sales. You can see that we're projected to sell approximately 134 million cubic feet of water this year. We are projecting to sell a little bit more in 2024, 138 million cubic feet. This is largely weather dependent. So you can see year to year, you get these big spikes and dips. If we have a dry year, we sell a lot of water. If we have a wet year, we sell less water. So it varies year to year, but the overall trend is downward. As fixtures get more efficient, people are being more conservative with their water use. We're seeing an overall downward trend in the water consumption. This is the financial summary for the water fund. You will see, as Director Keys mentioned, that 1.25 million leaving the water fund in 2024, going to the electric fund. Revenue, we're expecting to go up 13.6%. Part of this is due to the rate increase that I will mention shortly, as well as a higher unit sales based on our historic consumption. You'll also see a modest increase in our services and supplies. This is the material we buy to work on the distribution system, as well as contracted services. Those costs have all increased. So our capital plan, we budgeted about $3.7 million of capital to put back into the water system in '23. We're going to come in right on budget at $3.6 million. We're proposing the capital spend for 2024 to be about a similar number, $3.6 million. The fund balance policy for the water fund, we're expected to close '23 at about $5.6 million. And we're projected to close '24 at just shy of $4 million. This projection includes that transfer out of the water fund into the electric fund. So if that transfer were not happening, this fund balance in end of '24 would be about $5.2 million. We're still well above the fund balance policy, which is 4 months of operating expenses. For the water fund, this is about $1.6 million. So you'll see even with that loan to the electric fund, we're still well above that fund balance policy. The fiscal year 2024 financials are based on the following. As Director Sloth mentioned in his opening comments, there's an overall 10.25% rate increase. 8.5% of this is contributed to the 2016-17 water main replacement study. And we're building towards that $2.5 million spend, or $2.6 million spend per year in perpetuity to replace our water mains. So we have 2 more years of larger rate expansion, and then after 2026, as you can see in your CIP plan, the rates start to dip off as we build up those reserves. And the other 1.75% of that rate increase is attributed to the lead service line replacement plan, which again is an unfunded mandate. So to come up with the funds necessary to incentivize homeowners to replace their lead service lines, that can be directly attributed to about a 1.75% rate increase. You'll see that there's 2 rate components on a resident's water bill. There's a fixed charge based on the size of the meter you have, and there's a volumetric charge. So we sell water to Winnetka residents, unincorporated residents, and we also sell water to the electric plant to make steam. So that's what you see there. The rates from 2023 to 2024, that's about 10.25% difference. The typical Winnetka resident, which is about 1,500 cubic feet of consumption, is going to pay about $110 more per year. This is a slide we show every year, our comparison against some of our nearby neighbors and other municipalities outside our immediate radius. For a 1-inch meter and about 1,500 cubic feet per month of consumption, again, you're at about $100 on our 2024 rates. That's this black bar. This is where we were in 2023, so we moved up slightly. And here is where our neighbors are in comparison to us. So we're still in the middle of the pack in comparison to these other municipalities. You will notice, if you look at the names of some of these municipalities, generally speaking, if you are a wholesale water provider, you have a lower rate for your customers because you're subsidizing that by selling water to another municipality versus the other end of the spectrum. If you're a wholesale water purchaser, your rates are generally higher. So you can see kind of how that dichotomy plays out here, and we're right in the middle of that for next year. So operating expense on the distribution system, as Brian mentioned, we're budgeting for utility locating to address those about 5,000 locates a year. That's split across both funds. We always budget a placeholder for contracted resources for emergency help. There have been instances where we have widespread water main breaks, 5 or 6 breaks that overwhelms our staffing. So we always have a placeholder for contracted assistance if that were to happen again. Leak detection, we budget for multiple cycles throughout the year, as well as emergent service if our staff have trouble locating the source of a leak. This is part of our commitment to minimize our unaccounted water loss. So there's always, similar to the electric, there's a difference between what you take out of the lake versus what you sell. You want to try to shrink that difference as much as you can. So we perform these leak detections to help find inefficiencies on the system. We also are budgeting to replace fire hydrants, water meters to paint hydrants. We paint approximately a quarter of the hydrants in the village every single year. So you see that budget, that's a rolling 4-year cycle. Insertion valves, these are what are installed in the system if we have trouble getting a good shutdown. As you're well aware, our system is significantly aged. So occasionally we have valves that we can't completely shut off, so we'll have to install what's called an insertion valve, which gives us a positive shutdown in the event of an emergency. We also winterize our hydrants, so we pump our hydrants with food-grade antifreeze every year to help make sure they don't freeze, so that happens every single year. Operating expenses at the water plant include purification chemicals. This is an expense we see every year. This is how we turn the raw lake water into potable drinking water. Low lift pump repair contingency funding. This is for the low lift pumps are what take the lake water from lake level and bring it into the water plant. So we have contingency set aside for that. Intake inspection and cleaning. This is inspecting the raw water intake that goes out into Lake Michigan. So it's on alternating years. One year we inspect it, the next year we repair it, inspect it, repair it. So that's an alternating expense. 480 volt breakers. These are the large circuit breakers that control the auxiliary systems of the plants, the pumps. Those are significant expenses, so we have set aside money to get spares of those. And then just general building maintenance, replacing some doors down at the water plant, as well as security improvements, expanding those improvements that we saw at the yards. Those will be expanded down to the plant as well. Consulting services, so this is the money we have set aside to help us next year with a variety of projects. The first one you'll see is a replacement plan for the water plant mains. So we have 3 arterial mains that leave the water plant and feed into the system. 2 of those 3 mains are of significant age, and we want to address them before it becomes an emergency. But the difficulty is both in the real estate that we have down on the lakefront, as well as the hydraulic nature of the system. We need consulting services to help us come up with that plan. So we're budgeting $230,000 in consulting services for that. High lift pump control system. The high lift pumps are what take the treated, clean drinking water and pump it into the system. Kind of to tag off what Brian mentioned, we're a fully pumped system. We don't have any elevated storage. So if we don't have power, hence the diesels, we don't have water pressure. So we need those high lift pumps running 24/7, 365, and we're budgeting to develop consulting services to help us develop a control system for those. AMI dollars are being budgeted, regulatory reporting for the IEPA and IDNR, and then as hydraulic modeling is the last consulting expense you see here. So as part of the Streetscape Phase 6 that Director Schoen mentioned in Hubbard Woods. Hubbard Woods on Green Bay Road from Tower to Scott has 2 large water mains, as well as an emergency interconnect with the Village of Glencoe at Scott and Tower. So as part of the build-out for Streetscape Phase 6, we need to understand what size water main we're going to install, how we're going to interconnect with Glencoe, and we want to make sure we do our due diligence hydraulically on the system. So we're budgeting $15,000 for that assistance. So now I'll move into the capital plan. The $375,000 is what we have set aside for AMI in 2024 out of the water fund. We're budgeting about $340,000 in vehicles. The top 3 you see were already mentioned in the electric fund. Again, we're hoping to have these on the property in 2024, but there are no guarantees. But they are budgeted to be purchased in 2024. And the last vehicle you see there is a 2006 backhoe tractor. On last year's budget, we replaced one of the backhoes. This is the second backhoe. We have 2 backhoes to help us repair water main breaks. So this is the second backhoe replacement. And the last capital plan item you see on this page is a bulk water filling station. So what this would be a freestanding station at the yards that contractors, be it village or private, can use to take bulk water from our system. Currently, we just allow them to attach to a fire hydrant, which is not metered, not well controlled from a cross-contamination perspective. So this would improve that and also improve the billing, streamline the billing process for paying for that water. So continue with the capital plan. These projects are what we have scheduled for water main replacement. We're estimating about $1.2 million on Cherry Street from Glendale to Birch. I'll show you some diagrams in the forthcoming slides. Spruce Street from Locust to Birch. So this year we went from Glendale to Locust on Spruce. We're just going to finish that project and take it into the business district. And lastly, the Hibbard Road Stormwater Project, $340,000. This cost is already included in the Berger contract for the work on Hibbard and Sunset, but this work is work that directly affects the water system. It's a direct improvement that I'll show you on the diagram. So it's coming out of the water fund in this case. And these 2 projects we coordinated with the Public Works Engineering team. So we have a water main replacement model that we use to identify high impact areas, and they have a similar model with their IMS data. So there was some synergy here with these streets based on the road condition and the condition of the water main. So there was efficiencies in why these projects were chosen. We're budgeting professional services to help us design our fiscal year 2025 water main projects. So that's every year we budget ahead for next year's design phase. So that'll help us get those water main projects designed. And then lastly, lead service line replacement, again, the unfunded mandate. $245,000 in lead service line replacements on water main projects. The voluntary program is going to be extended next year to up to 80 residents. So this comes out to $5,000 per service in reimbursement, direct reimbursement. Emergent replacements, this is we typically see between 6 and 8 emergency replacements per year. Again, if a lead service is in need of repair now, we're no longer allowed to let that service stay as it is. It has to be replaced with copper. So where before that legislation was passed, you could have repaired the lead and moved on to the next day. Now it's a requirement that it be replaced with copper. So residents that do have leaks do often elect to replace it, and they get the credit for doing that work. So if you were to add up this entire expense for the lead service line replacement, this comes out to about 137 total services. And we need to average about 80 to 90 services a year to meet our deadline. So again, we're ahead of schedule in that respect. The next few slides are just depictions of the water main projects. So you'll see here on Cherry Street, we're going to go from Glendale to Birch, a new 8-inch water main, and all these services will be upgraded to 1.5-inch copper. Those residents that have lead services will be compelled to replace that with copper. Similar thing here, you see Spruce, this is where we stopped this year, Spruce and Locust. We're just going to continue on that progress and take it up to the business district at Birch and Spruce.
So when you do that, we take it to there and they gotta pay to take it the rest of the way to their house. We take it to their box or whatever, and when you say compelled,
Right.
they're responsible.
So under the village's contract, we take that service to the shut-off on the property line.
Right.
And then they can this year, they could have either hired their own private plumber to do the rest of the work, or they could have used the village's contractor.
Okay, great.
To do the work.
Thank you.
Yep. And this is the last water main project on the deck. So there's 2 mains on Hibbard, which is currently closed, as you know, for the stormwater project. There's a 16, which is the main that goes down and feeds the interconnect with Northfield and Wilmette. And there's a 6-inch main. Recently, the 6-inch main has been climbing up the ranks in our replacement model. It's had a lot of breaks in the past few years. So we identified with Public Works Engineering an opportunity to transfer these customers off of the 6 onto the 16. Thankfully, they're all copper customers. And then just abandon that 6 in place and just be done with it. So this is of direct benefit to the water system, not inclusive of stormwater improvements. So that's why this is part of our budget. That's all I have.
Great. Nick,
Yep.
the water mains on Green Bay Road in Hubbard Woods, where do they fall on the replacement
They are, I
hierarchy?
believe they're both so the replacement model has 230 odd segments, and I believe they're in the top 50%.
So they are scheduled for replacement at some point in time, reasonably soon? I mean,
It's hard to say. It's on a year-to-year basis with Public Works Engineering, where we identify those efficiencies. I think if streetscape were to happen, that would be the point in time to do it.
okay.
So question about, so the rate increase for this year is gonna be about 10% again?
10 and a quarter.
10 and a quarter. I'm just looking at this as from a resident standpoint, as in an isolated situation where you're 1%, 2% a year, and then you get to 10, okay. But if it's compounding at 10% a year, that's a problem.
So that was the plan.
Yeah.
The water rate plan, in order to establish the 100-year replacement cycle. So what year did we do the water rate study?
2017.
2017.
Yeah, that's about, yeah. And so that was the plan. Unfortunately, the unfunded mandate came on top of that for lead services.
Right.
And that's why the rates would have been scheduled at 8.5%, and they're concluded to, for the water main renewal, that would end in 2025.
Yeah, and I mean, at least, there's rationale for it, but the question is, as we've seen with most every other thing, everything else, it never goes. I mean, the question is there a time where we actually can say to our residents,
We think in 2025.
we're going to go back?
2025, it should level out.
Level out.
After 25, it should level out, because then we'll be at that level of being able to make the $2.5 million of investment each year to keep us on that 100-year schedule. So it was an 8-year plan. Do the work while you're increasing rates to get to that.
Oh, I get the work. I'm trying to figure out when you say level out, does that mean?
After 25 is the schedule.
But it doesn't go down, nothing
So
returns.
there is, in the
rate
transmittal
increases
letter,
level
there
off,
is,
though.
Nothing,
No,
there is a projection of the rate increases in the transmittal letter.
yeah.
And it goes down, in year 5, we're down to like 3.5% increase.
growth,
Growth.
Not a reduction. no.
not a reduction.
Yes.
The issue is that, what we were left with, and you weren't here for these conversations, Rob. You were here, right, Bob? For the painful,
I was on there for the electric stuff.
but, the bottom line was that communities all over the country install these systems and never appropriately reserve for them. And so what council's directive was that we need to create a pot of money that we can actually do the repairs and make sure we don't end up here again.
Right.
Because all these artificially low water rates that we enjoyed from the time the system was installed up until 2017 was a fallacy, because everybody was just turning a blind eye to the fact that these things were crumbling. Interestingly enough, you know, I look at Palatine, and that one just, it was like, how the heck could Palatine be that low? Because they haven't, I will guarantee you, they haven't reconciled with their aging system yet. And once they do, they're gonna have to start biting the bullet and paying prices as well. Unless they don't generate their own water out there, do they?
I don't believe so.
That's what I thought.
But we're the highest water generating community, correct? No, Glencoe's a little higher.
Glencoe.
Glencoe's higher.
Yeah, Matt,
sells
Wilmette has a very
significantly
sizable water
more.
plant.
And-
But I was in Wilmette at the time when we were doing the water plant study and invested millions of dollars in the water plant in order to serve the build-out in Glenview.
Right.
And those projections never quite materialized because the build-out didn't quite happen to the scale we thought. But Wilmette sells water to Glenview, another private utility, and some unincorporated customers, so that keeps their rates lower. Same thing in Highland Park.
Right.
They have subsequent customers and helps them quite a bit.
Does.
You can see what happened to Kenilworth. Kenilworth stopped their water production, contracted with Wilmette, and you see where their rates are now.
Yeah.
Plus, they're paying off debt to a water plant system that they're no longer servicing. So they're paying debt on a system they don't use, as well as getting subsequent party rates.
And in terms,
Harsh.
Can we get them to buy water from us?
We looked at it, and it was a more sizable investment for them to connect to us than to connect to Wilmette. We tried. The capital connection was higher.
When we do the Green Bay road study plan, there might be an opportunity.
Be Sheridan. We'd be looking down Sheridan. Yeah.
in terms of the long-term rates, we still have the commitment by 2038 to get rid of all the lead services, which is, as of yet, is still an unfunded mandate. So we still have that component of the rates that we're up against.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions for Nick?
Just really quick, do we know how many people voluntarily have upgraded? Like, are some of those lead service lines coming down faster as people are, found out they had lead service and are
This
not
year-
taking advantage of the funding and just doing it themselves?
Right, this year, you may recall, we expanded the scope of the voluntary program. I believe, looking at my numbers, on road rehab, we addressed about 40, so about 40 to 50 additional customers did it on their own volition. And we're budgeting for 80 next year.
Right, but I'm just saying, some people found out there wasn't funding and they just did it on their own, right? Do we know how, without requesting, reimbursement from the village, how many people have actually?
I don't think anyone would have done that, Tina. I think everyone had a chance to be subsidized. I think there was enough capacity. I mean, is that right?
Yeah, I'm not aware personally of any permits that were pulled outside the scope of
Okay.
the program.
Okay.
At the beginning of this year, a letter was mailed out to all 1,500 residents that have. And then that's going to be a recurring thing. So next year, if you still have a lead service, you're going to receive a letter at the start of the year.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Nick.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right, gang, we'll bring it up here. We had one directive from early on with respect to the investments. Any other thoughts, comments, and
I think we should look to move the AMI off of the finance department budget and into some of these funds, sanitary fund, water fund.
no, the mic.
Oh, sorry. I think we should take a look, and I think Rob has this in the notes.
I do.
About moving the AMI out of the finance department and out of the general fund and into the enterprise funds.
So,
I agree, that makes more sense to me.
but we all understand that is going to impact the rates even more on water and electric, just so we all understand that,
I
and
think it would
sewer,
come out of
right?
I don't know.
We'll take a look. I don't think it's going to have a material impact, but Tim and I will evaluate it.
Oh, cool.
And let you know.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Gosh, what else do you have, Rob?
One of the questions I had before today was the additional costs for FOIA response. Have we been able to quantify what our actual, like what we expended this year beyond what?
We're preparing that now. I've asked our
Okay,
That's what I had asked for.
Elrod Friedman to break that down for us.
Okay.
And I'll be sharing that with the council.
Okay. Well, not just legal expense, but also staff time?
We'll do our best with that.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Other modifications, additions, concepts, change strategies, capital, I guess you call
I
it
have-
capital deferral, because I didn't see anything in there that was a, a country club project or anything of that nature, right?
No, in fact, the opposite. I sort of just have a little sense of, are there things that we, from a capital perspective, that we should be looking at sooner versus later? I mean, I feel like all the operating budgets we have, everybody's so buttoned up, but I think a common theme was departments were having to push off things or make some trade-offs, maybe a little more than we might want in the long term. That's my gut instinct.
Of course, I've thought of the same thing, but then you realize for 10 years we haven't raised the levy.
Yeah.
And inevitably, some of that is kicking the can down the road, and now we're having to deal with some of that as well. So, not that we did it,
No, I think you're right, but I think we made what every company has to go through and every municipality who's doing it right is the hard decisions of trade-offs. And no one wants to do anything that's going to put anybody at risk, at jeopardy. But they're hard decisions as trade-offs. And unfortunately, in government, not many people are doing that, including, and even close by, they're just not making decisions. They're just not making hard decisions. And I think the residents appreciate, we may have to, but I think they're appreciating the exercise to really try and keep it, because the whole world's just, going up right now.
I didn't hear of anything that, I feel like this budget is, we talked about at the outset, has some forward-looking items in it.
Yeah.
AMI being one of them. AMI?
Yeah.
Being one of them. Infrastructure, obviously busting at the seams here. We just heard that for the last hour and a half. And trying to be efficient on the operating side. I wish we didn't have to increase the levy, but if we have to increase it a little bit, maybe we're there.
And just sort of building on my other point, I also realize there's a bandwidth issue too. This is a substantial capital plan, and some of these projects are huge that everybody's undertaking. So even if we had all the money in the world, that might not be possible to deliver more sooner.
The goal is to move all the pieces on the board, right? So.
But I also appreciate.
But I think we're realistic. I think with respect to everything that's going on in engineering, making sure we get a project manager that can help, because there simply wasn't enough people in the field to manage all the projects at one time. And people are burning weekends and late nights to try to make sure this gets supervised properly. So, I think we can sustain it. And mainly because, for example, in the water and electric funds, we have Brian and Nick, who are really good at what they do, and Jim and Public Works are really good at cooperating on what they do. So I think what we've presented is a very aggressive plan, but we can do it. We wouldn't recommend it if we couldn't do it. Yeah.
I think it's also helpful, Rob. I can't tell you how many budgets I've been through. It was like a Rubik's Cube, trying to figure out where the hell they're hiding their money. And I think you guys have been very transparent. Yes, you always are, but it just helps to be able to kind of lay it out like this and have it expand like this. So it just shows how much work you have to do to lay it out like this. So I appreciate it, all of you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, there was a lot of internal conversations even before we got to this day, right?
Oh, yeah.
To refine it, to dial it down. These budgets are really tight. I think the politically easy thing to do in our current environment is to just say, well, stuff's too expensive or whatever. But I think we're in this position, like especially on some of these major infrastructure projects, because people haven't had the, saying like, nobody wants to see increases in fees or taxes. But sometimes you have to, especially when your village is 100+ years old, right? This is just really tough stuff because, we are mindful of the, potential cost increase.
Right.
But I appreciate the fact, hearing that you already cut out 1.7, it sounded like, before you even got here. That's tough, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so thank you for doing that
sure,
heavy
and
lifting.
That's part of our normal process. It was the numbers higher this year, and there's some things that have been deferred. As I mentioned earlier, I'm don't want these lines to cross and us not being able to sustain our capital spend or what's really needed with respect to operations. So you have to tend to, like I said earlier, both sides of the ledger. You got to look at the expense side, but you always have to pay attention to the revenue side as well. And the other part of our challenge is that the mandated pension costs, the legislature's made some meaningful changes with combined investment for police and fire, tier 2, and not only in police and fire and IMRF. Those are helping, but those costs are still real. And they do start to erode from other operational costs when you're paying for them without a sustained funding mechanism. And that's just a trend line. So.
Great. All right, well,
We'll come back with respect to AMI and looking at the interest rate and see how that can maybe impact the levy. And we'll look as to what council meeting we can bring this back for, most likely the 21st or the first meeting in December.
okay. Could we know a little bit about that
Absolutely.
in advance?
We're going to compare notes after this meeting. There's extra, there are a number of information items that the council's requested, Music Fest information, right? And there's some other things that we need to provide. We'll bundle all that together, and we'll get it to you just as soon as we can prior to the meeting.
Good, yeah, again, from a standpoint of transparency, I don't know how you do it, but I think we would like to have this information sooner rather than later so we can chew on it and caucus if we need to about, if there's other things that we need to do or not need to do, but at least know the information. I'd like to see it before we get a packet dropped on us on the 18th of November, and we got to make a decision on the 21st of November. So
Fair.
Something ahead of that would be good.
Okay.
So. All right, we're just about done. Hold on here. Last item is public comment. Would anybody like to address Village Council on the items at hand?
I would make comments about some of this stuff, but I don't think anyone really cares what I have to say. In any case, hi, Ted Winnichenko. So, I've stopped by because I wanted to say a couple things. First, I guess I would generally like to apologize. I am clearly responsible for the things I say and my behaviors, and I can't push those off on what others might have done to contribute to my response. My response is my response. And while I feel that I've always tried, and I think in general I have been factually accurate, I think at times my comments can be a little bit sharp. And while I never intended my comments to be a personal affront to any specific individual, I can see that perhaps at times they might have been interpreted that way. And so I would like to apologize for that part of it. But having said that, civility is a two-way street. And so when I'm up here talking and I see people smirking, laughing, when I reach out to leadership in the village and point out factual errors in written communications that they have made and I'm ignored, when I meet with leadership in the village and I am told things which then turn out to be untrue, when leadership in the village won't even take the incentive to acknowledge a communication when asked directly to do so. None of these things are civil. None of these things speak to a higher form of government. They're just not. And while I look at that and I know that that affects me and that it affects how I respond, I can't blame that because I am ultimately responsible for my actions. We all are. And so it's disappointing. And so I'm sorry for my contribution to that, but I hope, and I continue to hope, that there will be a change on the other side of the table as well. So having said that, the other reason that I stopped by today is to say that I've been frustrated by what appear to have been misstatements made to me by village staff regarding what power or authority they had to provide notice that I could be potentially trespassing over the bed of Lake Michigan. It appears that there really wasn't any authority there. These statements were made, I feel like, with the express intent of trying to meet a requirement of a burden placed on, people to bring a claim of trespass. And it's clearly, it seems to me that it clearly was inappropriate. And so since I really don't want to go to jail, especially when I'm not doing anything wrong, I am going to just leave a little note here because no one will respond to my emails, just to make sure the village is aware that I have not received any notice from the state or any state agency that has authority over Lake Michigan. As such, I cannot be, if a police officer were to try to use what was said at a prior event on the lake as probable cause to either detain or arrest me, they will know that that is not probable cause, and ultimately that will expose, I think, the village to a possibility of a suit regarding a violation of civil rights. So since no one responds to my emails, I'm just going to leave a copy for village management. I left a copy with the chief. Thank you. I'll leave one there, and I guess here. So anyway, I will try to do better. I hope you will all try to do better as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Would anybody else like to address village council? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion for adjournment. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.
One last thing. One last thing for council. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. It was a really good day. We really appreciate it.